Ryan Mercer never imagined that saving one terrified child from a midnight storm would destroy everything he'd built. Within hours, armed mercenaries surrounded his garage. His 8-year-old son became a fugitive hunted through frozen mountains, and the most powerful family in America decided Ryan Mercer needed to disappear forever. This is the story of a single father who challenged a billionaire empire and paid the price in blood, fear, and sacrifice most people couldn't survive. If you want to see how far one man will go to protect the innocent, stay until the end. Like this video and comment what city you're watching from so I can see how far this story travels. The thunder hit so hard, Ryan Mercer felt it through the concrete floor. He was under a 98 Dodge Dakota at 11:45 on a Tuesday night, transmission fluid dripping onto his forearms when the entire sky seemed to crack open above Blackwater Bay. The coastal storm had been building all evening. Heavy rain turned to sideways sheets, wind rattling the garage's corrugated metal roof like something trying to get inside. Ryan slid out from under the truck and sat up, wiping his hands on a rag that was already more grease than cloth. His back ached. His shoulders burned. The cut on his palm from yesterday's brake job was still weeping through the bandage. He glanced toward the small office in the corner of the garage where his son was supposed to be doing homework. "Eli, you still awake?" No answer. Ryan stood, joints protesting, and walked across the oil-stained floor toward the office. The fluorescent lights overhead buzzed and flickered every time lightning struck. His garage, Mercer. Auto repair looked exactly like what it was. A one-man operation barely hanging on. Tools scattered across workbenches. Invoices stacked in crooked piles. A coffee maker in the corner that hadn't been cleaned in weeks. He found Eli sitting at the desk, not doing homework. The 8-year-old was staring out the rain-streaked window, knees pulled up to his chest. "Hey, bud, you okay?" Eli didn't look at him. "The storm's really bad." "Yeah, it is." Ryan crouched down beside the chair. "But we're safe in here. This building survived worse." That wasn't exactly true. The garage leaked in 3 places. The roof needed replacing, and Ryan was 2 months behind on the lease. But Eli didn't need to know that. "I don't like the thunder," Eli said quietly. Ryan reached out and ruffled his son's dark hair. "I know, but it'll pass. Everything does." Eli finally looked at him. "Mom didn't pass. She just left." The words hit harder than Ryan expected. He swallowed, searching for something to say that wouldn't be a lie. It had been 3 years since Sarah walked out. 3 years since she decided being a mother and a wife was too hard, too boring, too much work. She'd left a note on the kitchen counter and disappeared into whatever life she thought would make her happier. Ryan had never heard from her again. "Your mom made her choice," Ryan said carefully. "But you and me, we're solid. We take care of each other, right?" Eli nodded, but his eyes drifted back to the window. Ryan stood. "Finish your math homework. I've got to get this transmission buttoned up, then we'll head upstairs." They lived above the garage in a small 2-bedroom apartment that smelled like motor oil no matter how much Ryan cleaned. It wasn't much, but it was theirs. Ryan was halfway back to the Dakota when Eli's voice cut through the storm noise. "Dad, there's someone outside!" Ryan turned. "What?" Eli was pressed against the window now, pointing into the rain. "A kid. A little kid. She's just standing there." Ryan crossed the garage in 4 strides and looked out. At first, he didn't see anything. Just rain hammering the empty street, water pooling in the broken asphalt, the glow of a distant streetlight cutting through the downpour. Then he saw her, a small figure in the middle of the road, maybe 30 feet from the garage. She looked no older than 6 or 7, soaked through, no coat, no shoes, just standing there. "Jesus," Ryan muttered. He grabbed his jacket off the hook and yanked open the side door. The wind hit him like a fist, rain stinging his face. He ran into the street, boots splashing through water that was already ankle-deep. "Hey!" he shouted. "Hey! Are you okay?" "Oh, I'm at..." The girl didn't move, didn't even look at him. She was staring straight ahead, arms hanging at her sides, shivering so violently Ryan thought she might collapse. He reached her and dropped into a crouch. "Sweetheart, what are you doing out here?" Up close, he could see she was terrified. Her eyes were wide, unfocused. Her lips were blue. She had a cut above her left eyebrow, blood mixing with rain. "Where are your parents?" Ryan asked, trying to keep his voice calm. No answer. The girl just stared past him like she wasn't really there. Ryan glanced around. The street was empty. No cars, no people. Just rain and darkness and the distant sound of thunder rolling across the bay. He made a decision. Okay, come on, let's get you inside. He scooped the girl up. She weighed almost nothing, and carried her back to the garage. She didn't resist, didn't speak, just buried her face against his shoulder and shook. Eli was waiting by the door, eyes wide. Is she okay? I don't know yet. Go grab some towels from upstairs and find a blanket. Eli ran. Ryan carried the girl into the office and set her down gently on the old couch he kept in the corner. She curled into herself immediately, knees to chest, arms wrapped tight. It's okay, Ryan said softly. You're safe now. He crouched in front of her, trying to meet her eyes. Can you tell me your name? Nothing. Do you know where you live? Still nothing. Eli came back with towels and a heavy fleece blanket. Ryan wrapped the girl up and started gently drying her hair. She didn't fight him, didn't react at all. What happened to her? Eli whispered. I don't know, bud, but we're going to figure it out. Ryan pulled out his phone and dialed 911. The line rang and rang and rang. All circuits are busy, a recorded voice said. Please try your call again later. He hung up and tried again. Same result. The storm. The whole city's system was probably overloaded. He looked back at the girl. She was staring at the floor now, rocking slightly. The cut on her forehead was still bleeding. Okay, Ryan said, more to himself than anyone else. First things first. He went to the small bathroom in the back of the garage and found the first aid kit. When he came back, Eli was sitting next to the girl on the couch, not saying anything, just being there. Ryan knelt down and carefully cleaned the cut. The girl flinched but didn't pull away. This might sting a little, he said, applying antiseptic. She didn't make a sound. He put a small bandage over the wound, then sat back. Can you tell me what happened? How you got out here? For the first time, the girl looked directly at him. Her eyes were brown, huge, filled with something Ryan recognized. Fear. They took me, she whispered. Ryan's stomach tightened. Who took you? The men. In the cars. What men? I don't know. They had guns. Her voice was so small Ryan had to lean in to hear. They said grandfather sent them. They said I had to go with them. Ryan exchanged a glance with Eli. His son looked as confused as he felt. Where's your mom? Ryan asked gently. I don't know. They said she was hurt. They said I had to come with them, or she'd get hurt worse. Ryan's chest went cold. Who's your mom, sweetheart? What's her name? The girl hesitated, then whispered, Victoria Bennett. Ryan froze. He'd heard that name before. Everyone in Blackwater Bay had. Victoria Bennett was one of the most powerful CEOs in the country. Tech, real estate, venture capital, half a dozen industries Ryan couldn't even name. She was worth billions. Her face had been on the cover of Forbes twice in the past year, and this terrified little girl wrapped in a blanket in his garage was her daughter. Okay, Ryan said slowly. Okay, what's your name? Chloe. Chloe. That's a nice name. He tried to smile even though his mind was racing. You said men took you. Where did they take you? A big house in the hills. They locked me in a room. Her voice cracked. I broke the window. I ran. Ryan looked at the cut on her forehead. That's where you got hurt. She nodded. How long did you run? I don't know. A long time. I heard cars behind me. I hid. Then I just kept running until I saw your lights. Ryan stood and walked to the window. The street was still empty and walked to the... But that didn't mean anything. If what this girl was saying was true, if someone actually kidnapped Victoria Bennett's daughter, then they'd be looking for her, and they'd be looking hard. Dad? Eli's voice was quiet, scared. What are we going to do? Ryan turned. His son was still sitting next to Chloe, looking up at him with the kind of trust that made Ryan's heart hurt. Eli believed his father could fix anything, that Ryan always had the answer. Except right now, Ryan didn't. He pulled out his phone again and dialed 911, still busy. He tried the non-emergency police line. Same thing. The storm was getting worse. Thunder shook the building. The lights flickered again, and for a moment the garage went dark before the fluorescents buzzed back to life. Ryan looked at Chloe. She was staring at him, waiting. "We're going to keep you safe," he said. "That's the first thing. You're safe here." "What if they come?" she whispered. "Then I'll deal with it." He didn't know how, didn't have a plan, but he'd figure it out. He always did. Ryan went back to the office and tried calling the police again. Nothing. He thought about driving to the station himself, but the idea of putting both kids in his truck during a storm like this, with armed men possibly searching for Chloe, made his skin crawl. He sat down at his desk and ran his hands through his hair. His mind was racing through options, scenarios, outcomes, most of them bad. That's when he heard the engines, low at first, rumbling beneath the sound of the rain, then louder, closer. Ryan stood and walked to the window. His stomach dropped. 3 black SUVs were rolling slowly down the street toward the garage. No headlights, just dark shapes moving through the rain. "Eli," Ryan said quietly, "take Chloe into the back room, right now." "But Dad, what's—" "Now, Eli, what?" His son grabbed Chloe's hand and pulled her off the couch. They disappeared through the door into the storage area at the back of the garage. Ryan watched the SUVs pull up outside. They stopped in a line blocking the street. Doors opened. Men stepped out, 6 of them, all wearing dark jackets, all moving with the kind of precision that told Ryan these weren't random thugs. One of them walked toward the garage's front door. He was tall, broad-shouldered, maybe 50. He didn't knock. He just waited. Ryan took a breath, then crossed the garage and opened the door. The man looked him over with cold, measuring eyes. "Ryan Mercer? Who's asking?" "Someone who doesn't have time for games." The man's voice was flat, professional. "You have something that doesn't belong to you." "I don't know what you're talking about." "The girl, Chloe Bennett, she's here." Ryan kept his face neutral. "I'm alone, just working late." So. The man glanced past Ryan into the garage. "We saw you bring her inside 20 minutes ago." Ryan's pulse spiked, but he didn't move. "You've got the wrong place." The man smiled, but there was nothing friendly in it. "Mr. Mercer, I'm going to give you one chance to make this easy. Bring the girl out. Hand her over. Walk away." "There's no girl here." The man sighed. "Then we're going to have a problem." "Oh, that's yours. Get bats." He stepped back and made a gesture. The other 5 men started moving toward the garage. Ryan slammed the door and locked it. It wouldn't hold them. The lock was old. The frame was rotting, but it would buy him a few seconds. He ran to the back room. Eli and Chloe were huddled in the corner between stacks of old tires and boxes of parts. "Dad, what's happening?" Eli's voice was shaking. Ryan crouched down. "Listen to me, both of you. We don't have much time." He pointed to the small window high on the back wall. It led to the alley behind the garage. "You're going to climb out that window. Eli, you go first, then help Chloe down. You run. You don't stop. You don't look back." "Where do we go?" Eli asked. "Mrs. Harding's house. You remember where she lives? 3 blocks east." Eli nodded. Mrs. Harding was an old woman who sometimes watched Eli when Ryan had to work late. She was kind. She'd help. "You tell her to call the police. You tell her everything Chloe told us. Understand?" "What about you?" Eli's eyes were wide, terrified. Ryan forced a smile. "I'm going to be fine. I'm just going to talk to these guys." "Dad?" "Eli." Ryan gripped his son's shoulders. "I need you to be brave. I need you to take care of Chloe. Can you do that?" Eli's lip trembled, but he nodded. From the front of the garage came the sound of breaking glass. Ryan stood and dragged a metal shelf under the window. "Go, now." Eli climbed onto the shelf, pushed the window open, and squeezed through. Ryan lifted Chloe up after him. She looked back at Ryan with those huge, terrified eyes. "Thank you," she whispered. Then she was gone. Ryan shoved the shelf back against the wall and stepped into the main garage just as the front door burst open. The men came in fast, spreading out, hands inside their jackets. The tall one walked in last. He looked around the garage, then back at Ryan. "Where is she?" "I told you. There's nobody here." The man nodded to his team. They started moving, checking the office, the bathroom, opening cabinets. Ryan stayed where he was, hands at his sides, trying to look calm even though his heart was hammering. One of the men came back from the storage room. "Windows open in the back." The tall man's expression didn't change. "How long ago?" "Whoa, 30 seconds, maybe less." He turned to Ryan. "You just made a very stupid choice." "I don't know what you're talking about." The man stepped closer. "Chloe Bennett is the property of the Bennett family. Her grandfather wants her back. This isn't a negotiation." "Her grandfather?" Ryan frowned. "What the hell does that mean?" "It means you're out of your depth." The man pulled a phone from his pocket and made a call. The girl ran. "She's got maybe a 2-minute head start. Fan out. Find her." He hung up and looked at Ryan. "Last chance. Where did you send her?" "I don't know who you're talking about." The man sighed. Then he nodded to one of his team. The punch came from Ryan's left, a fist slamming into his ribs so hard the air exploded out of his lungs. He staggered, tried to stay upright, but another hit caught him across the jaw. He went down hard, tasting blood. "Let's try this again," the tall man said, standing over him. "Where is Chloe Bennett?" Ryan spat blood onto the concrete. "Go to hell." Another kick, this one to his stomach. Ryan curled around the pain, gasping. "You don't understand what you're protecting her from," the man said. "Chloe belongs with her family. She's going to inherit an empire. She's going to be one of the most powerful people in the world." "Sounds like she doesn't want it," Ryan managed. "What she wants doesn't matter. She's 7 years old. She's terrified. She'll get over it." Ryan tried to push himself up, but someone's boot pressed down on his back, forcing him flat against the floor. "Check the alley, Bosma," the tall man said. "They can't have gotten far." Ryan heard boots moving toward the back room. He tried to fight, tried to get up, but there were too many of them. Someone yanked his arms behind his back. He felt the cold bite of zip ties around his wrists. "You're making this worse," the tall man said. "For yourself, for the girl. She's a kid," Ryan said through gritted teeth. "She's scared. She doesn't belong to anyone." "You're wrong." The man crouched down so Ryan could see his face. "She belongs to the Bennetts, and the Bennetts always get what they want." From outside came the sound of engines starting, doors slamming. "Sir!" someone shouted from the alley. "They're gone. No sign of them." The tall man stood. He looked down at Ryan with something that might have been pity. "You have no idea what you just stepped into," he said, "but you will." He turned to his team. "Take him, see?" Ryan tried to fight as they dragged him to his feet, tried to pull away, but his hands were bound, his ribs screamed with every breath, and there were too many of them. They hauled him out into the rain and shoved him into the back of one of the SUVs. The last thing Ryan saw before they slammed the door was his garage. Lights still on, door hanging open, tools scattered across the floor. Everything he'd built, everything he'd worked for. And somewhere out there in the storm, his 8-year-old son was running for his life. The SUV pulled away. Across the city, in a private hospital room overlooking the bay, Victoria Bennett opened her eyes. Her head was pounding. Her left arm was in a sling. The smell of antiseptic made her stomach turn. She blinked, trying to focus. The room was dim. Just one small lamp in the corner. Rain streaked down the windows. Where was she? What happened? She tried to sit up and immediately regretted it. Pain shot through her ribs, sharp enough to make her gasp. "Easy," a woman's voice. "You've been in an accident." Victoria turned her head. A nurse was standing beside the bed, checking an IV line. "What? What kind of accident?" "Car crash. You were brought in about 6 hours ago." The nurse adjusted the IV bag. "You're lucky. Could have been much worse." Victoria's mind felt foggy. She tried to remember. She'd been driving. Where had she been going? Home. She'd been driving home from a board meeting in the city. It was late, raining, and then headlights. Bright, sudden, coming from the wrong direction. The impact. The world spinning. "Where's Chloe?" Victoria's voice came out hoarse, panicked. "My daughter, where is she?" The nurse hesitated. "I don't have that information, but I can check now." Victoria tried to sit up again, ignoring the pain. "I need to know where my daughter is." "Ms. Bennett, please, you need to rest. Get me a phone." Victoria's voice was steel now. "Right now." The nurse hesitated, then handed her a cell phone from the bedside table. Victoria dialed her home number with shaking hands. It rang 4 times, then went to voicemail. She tried Chloe's nanny, straight to voicemail, her security team. No answer. Her father. The line picked up on the first ring. Victoria. Her father's voice was calm, measured. I'm glad you're awake. Where's Chloe? A pause. She's safe. Where is she? With family, where she belongs. Victoria's blood went cold. What did you do? What I had to. Her father sighed. You've been distracted, Victoria, unfocused. You've let that child turn you soft. It's time she learned what it means to be a Bennett. You took her. Victoria's voice was shaking now, not with fear, but with rage. You staged the accident and you took my daughter. I saved her. From you. From the weakness you've been teaching her. She's 7 years old, and she's the heir to everything we've built. She needs to be raised properly, not coddled, not sheltered. His voice hardened. You had your chance, Victoria. You failed. Victoria felt something crack inside her. If you hurt her, I'm not going to hurt her. I'm going to make her strong. He paused. The way I made you. The line went dead. Victoria stared at the phone in her hand. Her father. Her own father had done this. She looked at the nurse. I need to leave. Ms. Bennett, you can't. You have a concussion, possible internal injuries. I don't care. Victoria swung her legs out of bed, ignoring the wave of dizziness that hit her. My daughter is missing. I'm leaving. I'll have to call security. Then call them. Victoria stood, steadying herself against the bed. But I'm walking out of here either way. The nurse stared at her for a moment, then quietly left the room. Victoria found her clothes in a plastic bag in the closet. Her phone was gone, probably taken by whoever brought her here. But she didn't need it. She knew exactly where her father would take Chloe. The family estate. 40 miles north, deep in the hills where no one could reach them. Victoria pulled on her clothes, moving slowly, methodically, breathing through the pain. Her left arm was useless, but she could manage with one. She was halfway to the door when it opened. A security guard stepped inside. Miss Bennett, I'm going to have to ask you to... Victoria didn't let him finish. She grabbed the IV pole beside the bed and swung it hard into his knee. The guard went down with a shout. She ran. Down the hallway, past startled nurses, through the emergency exit and into the rain. Her car was gone, but there was a parking lot full of vehicles. She found an old pickup truck near the back, checked the wheel wells. Keys. People in small towns still trusted each other. Victoria climbed into the truck and started the engine. Her ribs screamed, her head pounded, her vision swam. She didn't care. Somewhere out there, her daughter was terrified and alone. And Victoria Bennett was going to burn the world down to get her back. She slammed the truck into gear and drove into the storm. But bag. Eli had never been this scared in his life. He was running through the rain with Chloe's hand gripped tight in his, both of them soaked through, both of them gasping for air. Behind them, he could hear engines, shouts, footsteps splashing through puddles. They were being hunted. I can't, Chloe stumbled. I can't run anymore. Yes, you can. Eli pulled her forward. We're almost there. That was a lie. Mrs. Harding's house was still 2 blocks away, and Eli didn't know if they'd make it. The alley they were running through opened onto a side street. Eli paused, looking both ways. Empty. But he could see headlights sweeping through the intersection ahead. This way. He pulled Chloe left, away from the lights. They ran past darkened storefronts, overflowing dumpsters, chain-link fences. Eli's lungs burned. His legs felt like they were made of lead, but he kept running, because his dad told him to be brave. His dad told him to take care of Chloe, and Eli wasn't going to let him down. They turned another corner, and Eli's heart sank. Dead end. A tall brick wall blocking the alley. No doors, no windows, no way out. Behind them, the sound of footsteps was getting closer. Chloe looked up at him, eyes wide. What do we do? Eli looked around frantically. There had to be something, a fire escape, a dumpster they could hide behind. Then he saw it. A rusted metal ladder bolted to the side of the building. It led up to the roof. Can you climb? Eli asked. Chloe nodded. Then go, fast. She grabbed the lowest rung and started pulling herself up. Eli followed, his hands slipping on the wet metal. They were halfway up when the men entered the alley below. There! Someone shouted. Eli didn't look down. He just climbed. They reached the roof just as the men hit the ladder below them. Eli pulled Chloe over the edge and they ran across the flat, rain-slicked surface. Another building stood next to this one, maybe 4 feet away. Eli didn't think. He just jumped. He landed hard on the other side, rolled, came up running. Chloe, jump! She stood at the edge, looking down at the gap between buildings, shaking her head. I can't. Yes, you can. I'll catch you. She closed her eyes, took a breath, and jumped. Eli caught her as she landed, both of them going down in a tangle of limbs. They scrambled to their feet and kept running. The men were still coming. Eli could hear them shouting to each other, coordinating. But up here, on the rooftops, Eli had the advantage. He knew this neighborhood. He'd lived here his whole life. He knew which buildings connected, which ones had fire escapes, which ones had skylights they could drop through. The men didn't. Eli led Chloe across 3 more rooftops, then down a fire escape into another alley. They ran through a parking lot, over a fence, and finally stumbled onto a quiet residential street. Mrs. Harding's house was at the end of the block. They ran to the front door and Eli pounded on it with both fists. Mrs. Harding! Mrs. Harding! It's Eli! No answer. He pounded again. The door opened. Mrs. Harding stood there in a bathrobe, eyes wide with shock. Eli? What on earth? We need help! Eli was gasping, barely able to speak. Please, we need to call the police. Mrs. Harding looked at him, then at Chloe, then back at Eli. Come inside, she said quietly. Both of you. They stumbled into the warm, dry house. Mrs. Harding locked the door behind them and immediately went to the phone. Eli sank onto the couch, pulling Chloe down beside him. She was shaking so hard her teeth were chattering. You're okay, Eli whispered. We made it. Aisha koyi namas. Mrs. Harding was talking on the phone now, her voice urgent. Eli closed his eyes and thought about his dad. Wherever he was, whatever those men were doing to him, Eli hoped he was okay. He hoped they'd see each other again. Because right now, sitting in this stranger's house with a girl he barely knew, listening to the storm rage outside and the sound of Mrs. Harding calling for help, Eli had never felt more alone in his life. Ryan woke up tasting copper and feeling like his skull had been used for batting practice. He was in the back of the SUV, hands still zip-tied behind him, slumped against the door. Every bump in the road sent fresh pain shooting through his ribs. The metallic taste in his mouth was blood from where they'd split his lip. Through the rain-streaked window, he could see they were heading north out of Blackwater Bay, climbing into the hills where the wealthy families kept their estates hidden behind gates and private security. The tall man was in the passenger seat, talking on his phone in a voice too low for Ryan to make out. The driver hadn't said a word since they'd thrown Ryan in the vehicle. Ryan tested the zip ties. Tight. Professional. These weren't amateurs playing dress-up. They moved like military, talked like corporate, and clearly had enough money and authority to make people disappear without anyone asking questions. His mind kept circling back to Eli. Had his son made it to Mrs. Harding's house? Were the kids safe? Or were they being hunted through the streets right now while Ryan sat here helpless? The SUV turned off the main road onto a private drive. Massive iron gates swung open automatically as they approached. Ryan caught a glimpse of the name on the gate's arch. Bennett Estate. They drove for another 2 miles through manicured grounds before a house came into view. Except calling it a house was like calling the ocean a puddle. The place was a mansion, all stone and glass and sharp modern angles, lit up against the storm like some kind of fortress. The SUV stopped under a covered portico. The driver got out first, then opened Ryan's door and hauled him out into the night air. Move, the man said. Ryan didn't have much choice. They marched him through a side entrance, down a hallway lined with art that probably cost more than Ryan would earn in a lifetime, and into what looked like a home office. Except this office was bigger than Ryan's entire apartment. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the bay. A desk the size of a dining table sat in the center of the room. Leather chairs, expensive rugs. The kind of wealth that didn't need to announce itself because everyone already knew. Sitting behind the desk was a man in his 60s. Silver hair, sharp suit despite the late hour. Eyes that assessed Ryan the way someone might look at a bug they were deciding whether to step on. "Mr. Mercer," the man said. His voice was smooth, cultured, the kind that came from generations of private schools and country clubs. "I'm Malcolm Bennett." Ryan said nothing. Malcolm gestured to the tall man who'd brought Ryan here. "Cut him loose, Daniel." Daniel pulled out a knife and sliced through the zip ties. Ryan's hands were numb from lack of circulation. He rubbed his wrists, trying to get feeling back, and stayed standing. "Sit," Malcolm said. "I'm good here." Malcolm smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "I suppose you think you've done something noble tonight, protecting a frightened child, standing up to the bad men with guns." "Where's my son?" "Your son is fine. The police picked him and Chloe up 20 minutes ago. They're both safe at the station downtown." Ryan felt some of the tension leave his shoulders. Eli was okay. That was all that mattered. "So you can let me go," Ryan said. "Not quite yet." Malcolm stood and walked to the windows, hands clasped behind his back. "You see, Mr. Mercer, you've inserted yourself into a family matter that doesn't concern you. And in doing so, you've created complications I'd rather avoid. Your granddaughter was terrified. She said you kidnapped her. Chloe is 7 years old. She doesn't understand what's happening. She understands enough to run." Malcolm turned. "My daughter, Chloe's mother, is an exceptional businesswoman. Brilliant, driven, everything I raised her to be. But she's also made mistakes. She's let emotion cloud her judgment. She's raising Chloe to be soft, weak. She's raising her to be a kid. She's raising her to be ordinary." Malcolm's voice hardened. "The Bennett family is not ordinary, Mr. Mercer. We've built empires. We've changed industries. We've shaped policy and influenced nations. Chloe is the heir to that legacy. She deserves better than bedtime stories and birthday parties." Ryan stared at him. "You're insane." "I'm practical." Malcolm walked back to his desk and picked up a folder. "Do you know what I found when I had my people look into you? You're 32 years old. You run a failing auto shop that's 2 months behind on lease payments. You're a single father raising a boy on your own because your wife walked out 3 years ago. You work 16-hour days and barely make enough to keep the lights on." He dropped the folder on the desk. "You're barely surviving, Mr. Mercer. And yet you risked everything tonight for a child you don't even know. Why?" "Because she needed help." "That's it? That's your reason?" Ryan met his eyes. "What other reason do I need?" Malcolm studied him for a long moment. Then he sat back down. "I'm going to make you an offer," he said. $50,000, cash. Enough to pay off your debts, fix up your garage, maybe even take your son on a real vacation for once. All you have to do is walk away. Forget you ever saw Chloe. Forget tonight ever happened. And if I say no, then things become more difficult." Malcolm folded his hands on the desk. "I can make your life very uncomfortable, Mr. Mercer. I can have the health department find violations in your shop. I can have the IRS audit your taxes. I can have social services question whether you're fit to raise your son alone. I can make it so you spend the next year fighting legal battles you can't afford and eventually lose everything anyway. You see?" Ryan felt his jaw tighten. "You'd destroy a man's life just to cover up a kidnapping? I'd protect my family's interests by any means necessary. Your granddaughter is terrified of you. She'll learn to respect me, the way Victoria did. Victoria ran from you." Something flickered across Malcolm's face. Anger, maybe, or pain. But it was gone in an instant. "My daughter made her choices," he said quietly. "And I made mine. Now you need to make yours." He pushed a checkbook across the desk. 50,000, or nothing. What's it going to be? Ryan looked at the checkbook, then at Malcolm, then at Daniel standing by the door with his hand resting casually near his jacket, where Ryan knew there was a gun. He thought about Eli, about the garage, about how $50,000 could change everything, could give his son a better life, could buy them time and breathing room and maybe even a little happiness. All he had to do was walk away from a 7-year-old girl who'd already been through hell tonight. "I want to talk to the police," Ryan said. Malcolm sighed. "That's unfortunate." He nodded to Daniel. The punch came fast, faster than Ryan expected. It caught him in the ribs, right where he'd been hit earlier, Pain exploded through his chest and he went down hard, gasping. I tried to be reasonable, Malcolm said, standing, but you've left me no choice. Daniel hauled Ryan to his feet and dragged him back out into the hallway. They took him down a flight of stairs into what looked like a wine cellar. Stone walls, rows of bottles, the smell of damp earth. At the back of the cellar was a heavy wooden door with a deadbolt. Daniel opened it and shoved Ryan inside. The room was small, empty except for a bare bulb hanging from the ceiling. No windows, no furniture, just concrete floor and walls. Someone will bring you food in the morning, Daniel said. If you're smart, you'll use the time to reconsider Mr. Bennett's offer. He closed the door. The deadbolt slid home with a heavy thunk. Ryan was alone in the dark. He sank down against the wall and tried to catch his breath. His ribs were screaming. His face was swelling where they'd hit him. Every part of his body hurt, but Eli was safe. That's what Malcolm had said. The police had the kids. Ryan had to believe that was true, had to hold on to it. Because if he let himself think about the alternative, about his son still running through the storm, still being hunted, he'd lose his mind. He closed his eyes and tried to think. Malcolm Bennett wasn't going to let him go. Not after Ryan refused the money. Not after seeing this place, hearing the threats, understanding exactly what kind of family this was. Men like Malcolm didn't leave loose ends, which meant Ryan had to find a way out. And he had to do it fast. Across the city, in a fluorescent-lit room at the Blackwater Bay police station, Eli sat wrapped in a blanket that smelled like old coffee and stale cigarettes. Chloe was next to him, quiet, staring at nothing. A detective sat across the table from them. She was maybe 40, with tired eyes and a notepad that already had pages of scribbled notes. Let me make sure I understand, she said, looking at Eli. Your father found Chloe outside your garage. She told him she'd been kidnapped. Then men in black SUVs showed up and took your father while you and Chloe ran. Eli nodded. And these men, did they identify themselves? Say who they worked for. One of them said Chloe's grandfather sent them, Eli said. His voice was hoarse from running and yelling and trying not to cry. That's all I heard. The detective looked at Chloe. Sweetheart, is that true? Did your grandfather send those men? Chloe didn't answer. She just pulled the blanket tighter around herself. The detective sighed and stood up. I'll be right back. You two stay here. She left the room. Through the window in the door, Eli could see her talking to another officer in the hallway. They kept looking back at him and Chloe. Do you think my dad's okay? Eli whispered. Chloe finally looked at him. Her eyes were red from crying. I don't know. Those men won't hurt him, right? They just wanted you back. My grandfather hurts people, Chloe said quietly. When they don't do what he wants, he doesn't care if they're good or bad. He just cares if they're useful. Eli felt something cold settle in his stomach. How do you know that? I've heard him talk, on the phone, to people who work for him. She looked down. He's not a good person. My mom tried to keep me away from him, but he always finds a way. The door opened. The detective came back in, followed by a tall woman in an expensive suit. The woman had blonde hair pulled back tight and carried herself like someone used to being in charge. Hello, Chloe, the woman said. Her smile was professional, empty. My name is Patricia Vance. I work for your grandfather. He sent me to take you home. Chloe shrank back. Wait, Eli said. You can't just give her to these people. They kidnapped her. My dad, your father is fine, Patricia interrupted. He's at the Bennett estate having a conversation with Mr. Bennett. This was all a misunderstanding. That's not true, Eli said, looking at the detective. Tell her what we said. The detective looked uncomfortable. Ms. Vance has legal custody documents signed by Chloe's mother. Until we can reach Victoria Bennett directly to verify the situation, she can't reach her, Chloe said, her voice small but clear. Because grandfather hurt her. That's why he could take me, because she can't stop him. Patricia's smile didn't waver. Chloe, your mother was in a car accident. She's resting in the hospital. Your grandfather is taking care of you until she's better. You're lying. I understand you're confused, sweetheart. It's been a difficult night, but you need to come with me now. No. Patricia's smile finally cracked. She looked at the detective. I have legal documentation. The child is a minor. I'm authorized to take her into protective custody. The detective glanced at Eli, then at Chloe. For a moment, Eli thought she might refuse, might tell this woman to leave. But then she nodded. I'm sorry, she said to Chloe. My hands are tied. No! Chloe grabbed Eli's arm. Don't let them take me, please. Eli didn't know what to do. He was 8 years old in a police station with armed officers everywhere and adults telling him this was legal and proper and his father was gone. And Patricia reached for Chloe's other arm. Chloe yanked away and ran. She made it about 3 steps before an officer caught her. She kicked and screamed and fought, but she was 7 and tiny, and the officer just picked her up like she weighed nothing. Stop, Eli shouted. You're hurting her. Patricia walked calmly to where the officer was holding Chloe. Let's not make this harder than it needs to be, she said. You're coming home, Chloe. Where you belong, Cham. Chloe was crying now, reaching for Eli even as they carried her toward the door. Don't forget me, she said. Please don't forget. The door closed. Eli sat there staring at the empty space where she'd been, his heart pounding, his hands shaking. The detective sat back down across from him. She looked tired, defeated. I'm sorry, she said again. Where's my dad? Eli's voice cracked. I want my dad. We're working on that, I promise. But Eli could hear the lie in her voice. They didn't know where his father was. Or they did know and couldn't do anything about it. Either way, Eli was alone. Mrs. Harding appeared in the doorway a few minutes later. She looked scared and confused, and when she saw Eli, she rushed over and pulled him into a hug. Oh, sweetheart, she said. I called your aunt. She's driving down from Portland. She'll be here in a few hours. Eli didn't want his aunt. He wanted his dad. But his dad was gone. And so was Chloe. And Eli didn't know if either of them were ever coming back. Victoria was halfway to the Bennett estate when her stolen truck ran out of gas. She coasted to the shoulder of the highway, slammed her good hand against the steering wheel, and screamed in frustration. Rain hammered the roof. Lightning split the sky. The storm showed no sign of letting up. Victoria tried to think. She was 40 miles from her father's estate. No phone, no money, no way to call for help even if she wanted to. She looked at her reflection in the rearview mirror. Blood crusted on her temple from the accident. Her left arm hung useless in the sling. She looked like hell. She felt worse. But Chloe was out there, and Victoria wasn't stopping until she got her back. She climbed out of the truck and started walking. The highway was empty. No cars. No lights except the occasional flash of lightning. Just rain and wind and the sound of her boots on wet asphalt. She'd been walking maybe 10 minutes when headlights appeared behind her. Victoria turned. A semi-truck was slowing down, pulling onto the shoulder. The driver rolled down his window. He was older, bearded, wearing a baseball cap. You okay, miss? My truck died, Victoria said. She had to shout over the rain. I need to get north, up to the Bennett estate. The driver's expression changed. You work there? I'm Malcolm Bennett's daughter, Akal. He stared at her for a moment, taking in her injuries, her soaked clothes, the desperation in her voice. I don't do business with the Bennetts, he said slowly. But you look like you need help. I need a ride. That's all. Just drop me at the gates. The driver hesitated. Then he reached across and opened the passenger door. Get in. Victoria climbed up into the cab. It was warm and dry and smelled like diesel and old coffee. She slumped into the seat, suddenly aware of how exhausted she was. The driver pulled back onto the highway. Name's Carl, he said. Victoria. You look pretty banged up, Victoria. You sure you don't need a hospital? I need my daughter. Carl glanced at her. She at the estate? She will be soon, if she's not already. And your father? He is the reason I looked like this. Victoria stared out at the rain. He staged a car accident, took my daughter. Thinks he can raise her the way he raised me. And how's that? Like a weapon. Carl didn't say anything for a while. They drove in silence, windshield wipers beating rhythmically, rain streaming past the windows. Finally, Carl spoke. I had a daughter once, lost her to cancer when she was 9. His voice was quiet. I'd have done anything to save her, anything at all. Victoria looked at him. Whatever you're planning to do when we get to that estate, Carl said, you make sure you come out the other side. For your girl. I will. You promise me that. Victoria felt something catch in her throat. I promise. They drove another 20 miles before the estate gates came into view. Carl pulled off onto the access road and stopped just out of sight of the entrance. This is as far as I go, he said. Victoria opened the door. Thank you. Mars Sauter. Cheers. Hey! Carl reached into his jacket and pulled out a cell phone. Old, battered, probably a burner. Take this. You might need it. Victoria took the phone. I don't know how to repay you. Don't need repayment, just get your daughter back. Victoria climbed down from the cab and watched as Carl drove away into the storm. Then she turned and started walking toward the gates. She had no plan, no backup, no idea what she was going to do when she got inside. But she was done running, done hiding, done letting her father control everything. Malcolm Bennett had made the biggest mistake of his life when he took Chloe, and Victoria was going to make him regret it. The gates were locked. Cameras mounted on the stone pillars tracked her as she approached. Victoria looked directly into the nearest lens. Open the gates, she said. Her voice was steady, cold. Or I'll tear them down myself. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the gates began to swing open. Victoria walked through. The driveway stretched ahead, dark and winding. Security lights illuminated the manicured grounds on either side. In the distance, the mansion glowed against the stormy sky. She made it about halfway to the house before the SUVs appeared. 4 of them, coming fast from different directions. They boxed her in, engines rumbling. Men got out. 6 of them, all wearing the same dark jackets, all moving with practiced efficiency. One of them stepped forward. Victoria recognized him. Daniel, her father's head of security. Miss Bennett, he said, you shouldn't be here. Where's my daughter? Safe. Inside. Where you should be resting instead of wandering around in a storm with a concussion. Get out of my way, Daniel. I can't do that. Then you're fired. Daniel smiled. I don't work for you, ma'am. I work for your father. Victoria took a step forward. Daniel's hand moved toward his jacket. You really going to shoot me? Victoria asked. In front of witnesses? On camera? No one's shooting anyone. You're going to come inside, get looked at by a doctor, and have a conversation with your father like a civilized person. My father kidnapped my daughter, and your father is protecting his granddaughter from a mother who's losing her grip on reality. Daniel's voice was calm, reasonable. You've been under a lot of stress, Ms. Bennett. The accident, the head injury, you're not thinking clearly. I'm thinking perfectly clearly. Then you'll understand why we need to take you inside for your own safety. 2 of the men moved toward her. Victoria didn't back up. Touch me, she said quietly, and I'll make sure every one of you spends the next 10 years in court for assault. The men hesitated. Daniel sighed. Miss Bennett, please, don't make this difficult. Where is she, Daniel? Where's Chloe? With your father, they're having dinner. She's fine. She's terrified. She's adjusting. Kiki. Victoria felt rage building in her chest, hot and sharp. You've known me since I was 12 years old. You watched me grow up in this house. You know what he's like. You know what he does to people. Something flickered in Daniel's expression. Doubt, maybe, or guilt. I follow orders, Butts, he said. Even when they're wrong. That's not my call to make, Michelle. Then whose call is it? Victoria's voice rose. When does someone finally stand up and say no? When does someone finally do the right thing instead of just following orders? Daniel didn't answer. Victoria looked past him at the other men. Any of you have kids? 2 of them nodded. Then you know what I'm feeling right now. You know I'll do anything, to get to my daughter. She looked back at Daniel. So either let me through or shoot me. Those are your only options, because I'm not leaving without Chloe. For a long moment, no one moved. Then one of the younger security officers lowered his hand from his jacket. Let her through, he said quietly. Daniel turned. Harris. Let her through, Harris repeated. She's right. This is wrong. Another guard nodded. I'm with Harris. Daniel looked around at his team. at the men who were supposed to follow his orders without question. Half of them were stepping aside. "You're all fired," Daniel said. "Fine," Harris replied. "Better than living with this." Daniel stood there for another moment, then he moved aside. "Your father isn't going to be happy," he said to Victoria. "My father is never happy." Victoria walked past him toward the house. "That's his problem, not mine." She climbed the steps to the main entrance. The doors were already open, light spilling out into the rain. Malcolm was standing in the foyer, hands in his pockets, looking completely unsurprised. "Hello, Victoria," he said. "Where is she?" "Upstairs, asleep." Malcolm glanced at his watch. "It's nearly 3 in the morning. She had a long day." "Bring her to me, now." "I don't think so." Victoria started toward the stairs. Malcolm moved to block her path. "You need to stop," he said. "You're making a fool of yourself. Get out of my way." "Or what? You'll fight me? Your own father?" Malcolm shook his head. "You can barely stand, Victoria. You're injured, exhausted, running on pure adrenaline. You need medical attention." "I need my daughter." "Chloe doesn't need you right now. She needs stability, structure, discipline." "Well," Malcolm's voice hardened. "Things you failed to provide. I've given her love. Love makes people weak." "Yeah." "No," Victoria said quietly. "It makes them strong. Strong enough to stand up to men like you." She shoved past him and ran up the stairs. Malcolm shouted something behind her, but she didn't stop. She ran down the hallway, throwing open doors, searching. Guest rooms, empty offices, a library, a sitting room. Then she found it. Chloe's old bedroom from when they used to visit. It looked exactly the same. Pale pink walls, white furniture, toys arranged neatly on shelves, and in the bed, under thick blankets, was a small shape. Victoria crossed the room and knelt beside the bed. "Chloe," she whispered. "Baby, wake up." Chloe's eyes opened. For a moment she just stared, like she wasn't sure if she was dreaming. Then recognition hit. "Mom?" "I'm here, sweetheart, I'm here." Chloe threw her arms around Victoria's neck and held on like she'd never let go. Victoria buried her face in her daughter's hair and tried not to sob. "I thought you were hurt," Chloe whispered. "Grandfather said..." "I'm okay. I'm okay now." Victoria pulled back just enough to see her daughter's face. "We're leaving, right now." "He won't let us." "Yes, he will." Victoria stood and scooped Chloe up, ignoring the scream of pain from her ribs. She turned toward the door. Malcolm was standing in the doorway. "Put her down." "Victoria." "No." "I'll have security remove you from this house. Half your security just quit, and the other half knows that if they lay a hand on me or my daughter, I'll bury them in lawsuits they'll never escape." Malcolm's expression darkened. "You think you can threaten me? In my own home?" "I'm not threatening you. I'm telling you how this ends." Victoria's voice was ice. "I'm walking out of here with Chloe. And if you try to stop me, I will destroy everything you've built. Every company, every deal, every dirty secret you've spent 50 years hiding. You don't have that kind of power. Try me." They stared at each other across the room, father and daughter. Both stubborn, both ruthless, both willing to burn the world down to win. Finally, Malcolm stepped aside. "This isn't over," he said quietly. "Yes," Victoria said, "it is." She walked past him, carrying Chloe, and didn't look back. Victoria made it to the front steps before she heard the engines. Not the SUVs from earlier. Something bigger, heavier. The deep rumble of trucks coming up the driveway at speed. She turned, still holding Chloe tight against her chest. 3 black vans were racing toward the house, headlights cutting through the rain. "Mom?" Chloe's voice was small, scared. "Hold on to me," Victoria said. The vans screeched to a halt in front of the portico. Doors flew open and men poured out. Not security this time. These were different. Military gear, tactical vests, rifles held at low ready. Victoria's blood went cold. Her father walked out onto the steps behind her, calm as ever. "I tried to give you a choice, Victoria," Malcolm said, "but you've always been too stubborn for your own good. Call them off." "I can't do that. You've made threats, talked about destroying what I've built. I can't allow that kind of liability to walk out my front door." Victoria backed up, putting herself between the armed men and Chloe. These are your enforcers? The ones you use when bribes and lawyers don't work? They're insurance, Malcolm said, against people who don't understand how the world really operates. The men were spreading out now, forming a semicircle, cutting off every escape route. Victoria's mind raced. She was injured, exhausted, holding a 7-year-old child. There was no fighting her way through a dozen armed men, no running, no clever trick that would save them. She was trapped. Then she heard something else. Sirens. Distant, but getting closer. Malcolm heard them too. His expression tightened. "What did you do?" he asked. Victoria managed to smile despite the fear hammering in her chest. "I called in a favor. That wasn't true. She didn't have her phone. Didn't have anything except Carl's burner, which she'd used to... Wait. Before climbing out of Carl's truck, she dialed 911, reported an armed hostage situation at the Bennett estate. She'd left the line open, dropped the phone in the bushes near the gate. The police had been listening this whole time. The sirens were getting louder. Blue and red lights flashed at the end of the driveway. Malcolm's face went cold. "Stand down," he said to his men. "All of you, now." The tactical team hesitated. Then slowly, they lowered their weapons and stepped back toward the vans. Police cars came roaring up the drive. 6 of them, maybe more. They blocked the exit, lights spinning, doors opening. Officers came out with weapons drawn, shouting commands Victoria couldn't quite make out over the storm and the chaos. Malcolm raised his hand slowly. "There's been a misunderstanding, officers. This is a private family matter." "On the ground!" an officer shouted. "All of you, hands where we can see them." The tactical team complied immediately. Professionals who knew how this worked. They dropped to their knees, hands laced behind their heads. Malcolm stayed standing. "I want my lawyer." You'll get your lawyer at the station. Right now, you're going on the ground like everyone else." "Do you have any idea who I am?" "Don't care. Ground. Now." For the first time in her life, Victoria watched her father kneel, watched him submit, watched the mask of control slip just enough to show the rage underneath. An officer approached Victoria. She was older, silver hair, the kind of face that had seen too much. "Ma'am, are you Victoria Bennett?" Victoria nodded, still holding Chloe. "We got a 911 call about armed men holding hostages. Is that accurate?" "Yes. My father kidnapped my daughter. He was holding us here against our will." The officer looked at Malcolm, who was being handcuffed by 2 other cops. "That true, Mr. Bennett? This is a family matter," Malcolm said through gritted teeth. "You're making a mistake. We'll sort it out downtown." The officer turned back to Victoria. "You need medical attention?" "I need to find someone. Ryan Mercer. My father's men took him. He's being held somewhere on this property." The officer keyed her radio. "We need a search team. Possible kidnapping victim on premises." She looked back at Victoria. "Can you describe him?" 30s, dark hair, auto mechanic. Victoria's voice caught. "He saved my daughter's life tonight, and my father's men beat him and took him because of it." The officer's expression hardened. "We'll find him." The next 20 minutes were controlled chaos. More police arrived. The entire estate was locked down. Officers went through the house room by room while others searched the grounds. Victoria sat in the back of an ambulance with Chloe in her lap, wrapped in blankets, watching her father's empire crack open. The tactical team was being loaded into police vans. Malcolm was in a separate car, separated from everyone, already on the phone with lawyers who were probably scrambling to figure out how to spin this. A young officer approached the ambulance. "Ma'am, we found him." Victoria stood carefully, passing Chloe to a paramedic. "Where?" "Wine cellar. Locked room in the back. He's hurt but conscious." Victoria followed the officer into the house, down the stairs, through the rows of expensive bottles Malcolm collected like trophies. The door to the storage room was open now. Ryan Mercer sat on the floor against the far wall, looking like he'd been through a war. His face was swollen, bruised, blood dried on his lip. He moved like his ribs hurt. But when he saw Victoria, he tried to stand. "Don't," she said, kneeling beside him. "You're hurt. Where's Chloe?" His voice was rough. Is she... She's safe, outside with the paramedics. Ryan's shoulders sagged with relief. And Eli? My son? I don't know, but the police are here. They'll find him. Ryan closed his eyes. They took him. Those men. They said the police picked up both kids, but I didn't know if... He stopped, jaw clenched. I didn't know if they were lying. They were telling the truth. The kids made it to safety. Victoria looked at the room, the locked door, the bare concrete. My father did this to you. Yeah. I'm sorry. Not your fault. He's my father. Everything he does is my fault. Victoria stood and offered her hand. Come on, let's get you out of here. Ryan took her hand and let her help him up. He moved slowly, carefully, like everything hurt. They made it back upstairs and outside where the rain had finally started to ease. Dawn was breaking in the east, pale gray light pushing back the storm. Chloe saw Ryan and broke away from the paramedic, running to him. You're okay, she said, throwing her arms around his waist. Ryan winced but didn't pull away. He put a hand on her head. Yeah, kiddo, I'm okay. They hurt you. I've had worse. That was probably a lie, but Chloe seemed to believe it. The senior officer approached. Mr. Mercer, I'm Lieutenant Sarah Chen. We need to get your statement about what happened tonight. After, Ryan said. I need to find my son first. We're working on that. The Blackwater Bay Station has him. They're sending a car to bring him here. Ryan looked like he wanted to argue, like he wanted to run to the station himself and not stop until he had Eli in his arms. But his legs were shaking and his face was gray, and Victoria could see him trying to hold it together through sheer stubbornness. Sit down before you fall down, she said quietly. I'm fine. You're not. Sit. Ryan sat on the ambulance bumper. A paramedic immediately started checking him over, shining a light in his eyes, probing his ribs. Victoria watched police escort her father to a car. Malcolm looked at her one last time before they put him inside. There was no apology in his eyes. No regret, just cold calculation, already working through scenarios, planning his next move. He thought this was temporary, a setback he could lawyer his way out of. Victoria was going to make sure he was wrong. Eli had never been in a police car before. He sat in the back, hands folded in his lap, watching the dark countryside roll past outside the window. The officer driving hadn't said much, just that they were taking him to his father. Mrs. Harding had wanted to come, but they'd said family only. His aunt was supposed to meet them at the Bennett estate. Eli didn't care about any of that. He just wanted his dad. The car turned onto a long driveway. Up ahead, Eli could see lights. Police cars everywhere, an ambulance, people moving around. The car stopped, and the officer opened Eli's door. Come on, kid. Let's get you to your dad. Eli climbed out. His legs felt weird. Numb and tingly at the same time. He'd been sitting in police stations and cars for hours, and he was so tired he could barely think straight. But then he saw his father sitting on the back of an ambulance and nothing else mattered. Dad! Eli ran. Ryan stood up too fast, staggered, caught himself. Then Eli crashed into him and Ryan's arms came around him tight enough that Eli could barely breathe. I got you, Ryan said, his voice rough. I got you, bud. You're okay. Eli buried his face in his father's chest and started crying. He didn't want to. He wanted to be brave. But everything that had happened tonight came pouring out, and he couldn't stop it. Ryan just held him and didn't say anything, just stood there in the rain while Eli fell apart. When Eli finally pulled back, wiping his eyes, he saw Chloe standing a few feet away. She looked small and scared and alone. Hey, Eli said. Hi. They stared at each other. Two kids who'd been through hell together and come out the other side. You did good tonight, Ryan said to Eli. You protected her, kept her safe. I'm proud of you. Eli looked up at his father. You protected her too. Yeah, well, someone had to. A woman approached. She was tall, polished, looked like the kind of person who owned buildings and ran companies. But her eyes were soft when she looked at Chloe. I'm Victoria, she said to Ryan, Chloe's mother. Ryan nodded. Ryan Mercer. I know. My daughter told me what you did, how you helped her. Victoria's voice caught slightly. Thank you. I don't have words for... You don't need words, Ryan said. She needed help. I helped, that's all. That's not all. You risked everything, your safety, your son, your entire life. Victoria looked at Eli, then back at Ryan. Most people would have walked away. I'm not most people. C'est pas what my Sam. Victoria smiled slightly. I'm starting to see that. Lieutenant Chen interrupted. I hate to break this up, but we need statements from everyone. Mr. Mercer, you first. Then Miss Bennett. Then we'll talk to the kids. The next 2 hours were a blur of questions, answers, repeating the same story over and over. Eli told them about finding Chloe, about the men with guns, about running across rooftops in the storm. Ryan told them about the garage, the SUVs, Malcolm's offer, and threats, being locked in the wine cellar. Victoria told them everything: the car accident, her father's confession, the kidnapping, the decades of corruption and abuse hidden behind the Bennett family name. And slowly, piece by piece, the full picture emerged. Malcolm Bennett hadn't just kidnapped his granddaughter. He'd orchestrated the car accident that injured Victoria. He'd used his private security force to hunt 2 children through the streets. He'd imprisoned a civilian who'd done nothing but help a scared kid. And according to Victoria, this wasn't even close to the worst thing he'd done. By the time the sun was fully up, federal agents had arrived. This was bigger than a local kidnapping case now. This was conspiracy, racketeering, witness intimidation, a dozen other charges that kept stacking higher. Malcolm Bennett was finished. Ryan sat with Eli on a bench outside the mansion, watching the chaos. His son was curled against his side, half asleep. Victoria approached with Chloe's hand in hers. They're going to need us to testify, she said. When this goes to trial, all of us. Ryan nodded. Yeah, I figured. Are you willing to do that? If it means your father goes to prison? Absolutely. Victoria sat down on the bench beside them. Chloe climbed into her lap, exhausted. Where do you go from here? Victoria asked. Ryan shrugged. Back to the garage, I guess. Try to salvage what's left. Probably need to hire a lawyer myself to make sure Malcolm's people don't come after me again. They won't. I'll make sure of it. How? I have resources. Money. Lawyers who actually work for me instead of my father. Victoria looked at him. I can help you rebuild. Set up security. Make sure you and Eli are protected. I don't need charity. It's not charity. It's the least I can do after what you went through tonight. Ryan was quiet for a moment. Then he said, I don't want money, but if you're offering help, I could use advice. Legal stuff. Making sure Eli stays safe. Done. They sat in silence for a while. The police were starting to pack up. The tactical team had been hauled away. Malcolm was long gone, already sitting in a holding cell somewhere downtown. What about you? Ryan asked. Where do you go? T. Victoria looked out at the estate, at the massive house where she'd grown up, where her father had shaped her into something hard and ruthless and cold. I don't know, she said honestly. I spent my whole life building companies, making deals, proving I was just as strong as he was. And now that he's gone, she trailed off. I don't know who I am without him. You're Chloe's mom, Eli said sleepily. That's who you are. Oh. Victoria looked down at her daughter, then over at Eli. A small smile crossed her face. Yeah, she said softly. I guess I am. 4 days later, Ryan was back at the garage trying to make sense of the mess Malcolm's men had left behind. They'd torn through the place looking for Chloe, overturned toolboxes, scattered parts, broken the front door when they'd forced their way in. Insurance was refusing to cover it, said it was criminal damage and he needed to file a police report, get reimbursed through the court system, jump through a dozen hoops that would take months. Ryan didn't have months. He had bills due next week and customers asking when their cars would be ready, and a son who still woke up crying from nightmares about men with guns. He was under the Dodge Dakota again, trying to finish the transmission job he'd started the night everything went sideways when he heard footsteps. We're closed, he called out. Not according to the sign, Victoria's voice. Ryan slid out from under the truck. She was standing in the doorway wearing jeans and a simple sweater. looking nothing like the CEO he'd seen on magazine covers. Chloe stood beside her, holding a paper bag. "Hey," Ryan said, standing. "Didn't expect to see you again." "We brought lunch," Chloe said, holding up the bag. "Mom said you probably weren't eating right." "Your mom's probably correct." Ryan wiped his hands on a rag. "Where's Eli?" "School," Victoria said. "Which is where Chloe should be, but she insisted we come see you first." Chloe walked over and set the bag on Ryan's workbench. "I wanted to say thank you. For real this time, not in a police station." Ryan crouched down to her level. "You already thanked me, kiddo." "Not enough. You saved my life, you and Eli both." "Yeah, well, you two saved each other. Eli told me how brave you were, running across those roofs, not giving up." Chloe looked down. "I was really scared." "Being brave doesn't mean not being scared. It means being scared and doing it anyway." She looked up at him. "Is that what you were? When you didn't give grandfather the money?" Ryan glanced at Victoria, who was watching quietly. "Yeah, he said. "That's what I was." Chloe hugged him suddenly, quick and fierce. Then she stepped back, embarrassed. Victoria put a hand on her daughter's shoulder. "Why don't you go wait in the car? I need to talk to Mr. Mercer about something." Chloe nodded and left. Victoria walked over to the workbench, looking at the scattered tools, the repair orders stacked in messy piles. "How bad is it?" she asked. "The garage? I'll manage." "Ah, that's not an answer." Ryan sighed. "I'm 2 months behind on rent. Insurance won't cover the damage. I've got 3 jobs I can't finish because your father's guys broke half my tools." He leaned against the truck. "But I'll figure it out. I always do." Victoria pulled an envelope from her jacket and set it on the workbench. "What's that?" Ryan asked. "A retainer. I'm hiring you as my personal mechanic. $40,000 up front. You'll maintain my vehicles, provide emergency service when needed, and bill me at triple your normal rate." Oh, Ryan stared at the envelope. "I don't need your pity." "This isn't pity. I actually do need a mechanic I can trust. Most of the people in my life work for my father's money, not for me. I need someone who'll tell me the truth, even when it's inconvenient." Oh, she looked at him. "You've already proven you're that person. There are 100 mechanics in this city, and none of them stood up to armed men to protect a child they didn't know. None of them got beaten and threatened and still refused to back down." Victoria's voice was firm. "You have integrity, Mr. Mercer. That's rare, and it's worth paying for." Ryan picked up the envelope. It was heavy, real. "This feels like charity," he said quietly. "Then consider it payment for what you lost helping my daughter. Your time, your safety, your peace of mind." Victoria moved toward the door. "Use it or don't. But don't insult me by pretending you don't need help. Everyone needs help sometimes." She was almost to the door when Ryan spoke. "Victoria." She turned. "Thank you." She nodded. "You're welcome." After she left, Ryan opened the envelope. Inside was a cashier's check for $40,000 and a business card with Victoria's personal number. He stared at it for a long time. Then he got back to work. 3 weeks later, the story broke national. Federal prosecutors charged Malcolm Bennett with kidnapping, conspiracy, witness intimidation, and a dozen counts of fraud and corruption that had been hidden for decades. The investigation had uncovered offshore accounts, bribed officials, manipulated contracts, and a web of illegal activity stretching back 30 years. The media went insane. Malcolm Bennett's face was on every news channel. His company's stock prices collapsed. Board members resigned. Partners cut ties. The Bennett empire was imploding. Ryan watched it happen from his garage, which was now clean and organized and actually turning a profit for the first time in years. He'd paid off his back rent, fixed the broken door, bought new tools, even hired a part-time assistant so he didn't have to work 16-hour days anymore. Eli was doing better too. The nightmares had faded. He still got quiet sometimes, still looked over his shoulder when they walked home at night, but he was healing. They both were. Ryan was closing up one evening when Victoria's car pulled up outside. She got out alone this time, no Chloe. "Hey," Ryan said. Everything okay? My father's trial starts tomorrow, Victoria said. I wanted to make sure you were ready. I've been over my testimony 100 times with the prosecutors. I'm ready. It's going to be ugly. His lawyers are going to try to discredit everyone. They'll dig into your past, your finances, your ex-wife leaving. They'll try to paint you as unreliable. Let them try. Victoria smiled slightly. You're not worried? About what? I told the truth. I'll keep telling the truth. That's all I can do. She looked at him for a moment, something shifting in her expression. You're a good man, Ryan Mercer. I'm just a mechanic who did what anyone should have done. No, most people wouldn't have. Most people would have looked the other way, told themselves it wasn't their problem. She stepped closer. You risked everything. Stepped closer. And you didn't ask for anything in return. I asked you for legal advice, which I was happy to give. Victoria paused. I'm staying in Blackwater Bay after the trial. I'm not going back to the corporate world. Ryan raised his eyebrows. Really? Really? I'm going to rebuild. Differently this time. Focus on things that matter instead of just making money. She looked at the garage. Maybe even help other small businesses like yours. People who need support but can't afford the kind of lawyers and resources I have access to. That's a big change. I know, but Chloe needs stability, normalcy. And honestly, so do I. Victoria met his eyes. I spent my whole life becoming my father. It's time to figure out who else I can be. Ryan didn't know what to say to that, so he just nodded. Victoria pulled out her keys. I'll see you tomorrow, at the courthouse. Yeah, see you there. She started to leave, then turned back. Ryan? Yeah? Chloe keeps asking if she can see Eli. They've been texting, but she wants to actually spend time together. Maybe we could... She hesitated. Maybe we could get dinner sometime, the four of us. Ryan felt something warm settle in his chest. Yeah, I'd like that. Victoria smiled. A real one this time, not the polished corporate mask. Good, she said. Me too. She got in her car and drove away. Ryan stood there for a while, watching the taillights disappear into the evening traffic. Then he went inside, locked up the garage, and climbed the stairs to the apartment where his son was waiting. Tomorrow they'd face Malcolm Bennett in court. Tomorrow they'd relive everything that happened that night in the storm. But tonight, they were safe. They were together. And for the first time in a long time, Ryan felt like maybe things were going to be okay. Not perfect, not easy, but okay. And right now, that was enough. The federal courthouse in downtown Seattle was a fortress of concrete and glass that looked like it had been designed to intimidate anyone who walked through its doors. Ryan stood on the steps with Eli, both of them wearing the only suits they owned. Ryan's was old, bought for a funeral 5 years ago, and slightly too tight in the shoulders now. Eli kept tugging at his collar like it was strangling him. Do I have to wear this? Eli asked for the third time. Yeah, bud, you do. It's uncomfortable. I know, but we're here to do something important. Sometimes important things are uncomfortable. Media vans lined the street. Reporters clustered near the entrance, cameras ready. This was the biggest trial the Pacific Northwest had seen in decades. Malcolm Bennett's fall from grace was national news. Victoria appeared at the top of the steps with Chloe. They were dressed more formally than Ryan had ever seen them. Victoria in a dark suit that probably cost more than Ryan's entire wardrobe. Chloe in a navy dress with her hair pulled back. Ready? Victoria asked. As we'll ever be, Ryan said. They walked inside together, through metal detectors and security checkpoints, past photographers who shouted questions Victoria ignored with practiced ease. The courtroom was already packed. Spectators filled the gallery. More reporters in the back rows. Federal prosecutors huddled at one table, a wall of files and laptops spread before them. And at the defense table sat Malcolm Bennett. He looked smaller than Ryan remembered, older. The expensive suit and perfect posture couldn't hide the fact that 3 weeks in custody had worn him down. But his eyes were the same, cold, calculating. When he looked at Victoria and Chloe, there was no warmth, no grandfatherly affection, just the same ruthless assessment Ryan had seen in the wine cellar. They took their seats in the witness area. Ryan felt Eli press closer against his side. You okay? Ryan whispered. Eli nodded, but his hands were shaking. The bailiff called the court to order. Everyone rose as the judge entered. She was in her 60s, gray hair, sharp eyes that missed nothing. Be seated, she said. We're here today for the trial of Malcolm Bennett on multiple federal charges. Let's begin. The prosecution went first. The lead prosecutor was a woman named Janet Reeves, career federal attorney who looked like she'd been waiting her whole life for a case like this. Your Honor, the evidence will show that Malcolm Bennett is not the philanthropist and business leader he's pretended to be for decades. He is a criminal who has used wealth, power, and violence to build an empire on corruption and fear. She laid out the charges one by one: the kidnapping of Chloe Bennett, the staged car accident that nearly killed Victoria, the imprisonment of Ryan Mercer, the decades of bribery, fraud, and manipulation. Malcolm's lawyers objected constantly, moved to dismiss, claimed prosecutorial overreach. The judge shut them down every time. Save it for your defense, counselors, she said. Miss Reeves, call your first witness. The prosecution calls Victoria Bennett. Victoria stood. She squeezed Chloe's hand once, then walked to the witness stand. The oath was administered. Victoria sat, back straight, hands folded, looking directly at the jury. Janet Reeves approached. Ms. Bennett, can you describe your relationship with the defendant? He's my father. And how would you characterize that relationship? Bishop Victoria was quiet for a moment. Complicated, difficult, built on control rather than love. Can you elaborate? My father raised me to be an extension of his empire. My father raised me to be, everything I did was meant to reflect well on him, to increase his power and influence. There was no room for weakness, no room for failure. Did you have a choice in this? No. From the time I was old enough to understand, I knew that my value to my father was based entirely on what I could accomplish, not who I was as a person. Malcolm's lead attorney, a man named Gregory Hale, stood. Objection. The witness is editorializing about her childhood feelings rather than providing factual testimony. Overruled, the judge said. The witness may describe her experiences. Janet continued. Ms. Bennett, let's talk about the night of April 14th. Can you describe what happened? Victoria took a breath. I was driving home from a board meeting in the city. It was late, raining hard. A truck ran me off the road. I crashed into a barrier. The next thing I remember, I woke up in a hospital. And what did you discover when you woke up? That my daughter was missing, and that my father had orchestrated the entire thing. Isakis. A murmur ran through the courtroom. Malcolm's expression didn't change. How did you learn this, Yes? Janet asked. I called my father from the hospital. He told me himself. Said he'd taken Chloe to raise her properly. That I'd failed as a mother. What did you do then? I left the hospital against medical advice and went to find my daughter. You were injured at the time? Concussion, broken arm, bruised ribs? Yes. But you still went after your daughter. Of course I did. She's my child. Janet walked to the evidence table and picked up a photograph. I'm showing the witness exhibit 12. Ms. Bennett, can you identify this? Victoria looked at the photo. Her jaw tightened. That's me the morning after the crash, in the hospital. The photograph was projected on the courtroom screens. Victoria's face was bruised and swollen, her arm in a sling, dried blood in her hair. The jury members looked disturbed. And despite these injuries, you pursued your daughter? Yes. Why? Because she was in danger, because my father had taken her and I knew what he was capable of. What did you think he was capable of? Anything. He spent his entire life believing that power justifies any action, that the ends always justify the means. Victoria looked directly at her father. I knew if I didn't get Chloe back, he'd turn her into what he tried to turn me into, and I couldn't let that happen. Gregory Hale stood again. Your Honor, the witness continues to provide opinion rather than fact. I'll allow it, the judge said. Continue, Ms. Reeves. Janet walked Victoria through the rest of that night. The drive to the estate, the confrontation with security, finding Chloe, the armed men who tried to stop her from leaving, With each detail, the case against Malcolm grew stronger. Finally, Janet asked, "Miss Bennett, why are you testifying against your own father?" Victoria's voice was steady. "Because he's a danger to everyone around him. Because he believes his wealth and power put him above the law. And because if I don't stop him, he'll hurt more people, more families." She paused. "I won't let that happen anymore." "Thank you. No further questions." Gregory Hale approached for cross-examination. He was good, polished, the kind of lawyer who could make a guilty man sound reasonable. "Ms. Bennett, you've built a reputation as a ruthless CEO, haven't you? Someone willing to do whatever it takes to win?" "I've been successful in business, yes. And including deals that some might consider ethically questionable? I've made decisions I'm not proud of." "But so you understand the compromises that come with power?" "I understand that power can corrupt." "Yes. And yet you're here today claiming your father is the problem, when you yourself have used many of the same tactics." Victoria met his eyes. "The difference is, I'm trying to do better. My father never will." "Isn't it true that you and your father had a business dispute 2 months before this alleged kidnapping? A disagreement about company direction that ended with you threatening to expose his dealings? We had disagreements frequently. That's not unusual. But this disagreement was different, wasn't it? You threatened him. Said you'd destroy everything he'd built if he didn't step down." "That's not accurate. We have emails, Ms. Bennett, communications between you and several board members discussing ways to force your father out of the company." Janet stood. "Objection. Relevant? Your Honor, this goes to the witness's credibility and potential motive for these accusations." The judge thought for a moment. "I'll allow it. But make your point quickly, Mr. Hale." Gregory produced a stack of printed emails. These are communications from Ms. Bennett to board members dated March 7th through March 23rd. In them, she discusses removing the liability and cutting out the cancer before it spreads. Those are your words, aren't they? Victoria's face was calm. "Yes. I wanted my father removed from active management because his methods were hurting the company and the people who worked for us. Or because you wanted control." "One. I wanted to stop the damage he was causing. Convenient that just weeks after these emails, you're accusing him of kidnapping. There's nothing convenient about it. He actually kidnapped my daughter. Or perhaps you saw an opportunity, a family dispute that could be weaponized, a chance to remove your father permanently while painting yourself as the victim." Victoria's voice went cold. "My daughter was terrified. She ran from armed men in the middle of a storm. Ryan Mercer was beaten and imprisoned for trying to help her. Those are facts, Mr. Hale, not a family dispute." "Ryan Mercer, the mechanic you're now financially supporting, the man whose garage you've invested in, the man whose testimony is conveniently aligned with yours. I helped Ryan Mercer because my father destroyed his property and threatened his family. That's not a conspiracy. That's basic decency." Gregory smiled slightly. "No further questions." Gregory ate. Victoria stepped down. She looked tired but steady as she returned to her seat. Ryan watched Malcolm the entire time. The old man hadn't reacted to anything, hadn't shown emotion, just sat there like this was a minor inconvenience. The prosecution called witness after witness over the next 2 days. Federal agents who'd investigated Malcolm's finances. Former employees who testified about bribes and threats. The security guards who'd quit rather than follow orders that night at the estate. Daniel, Malcolm's former head of security, was particularly damning. He described years of illegal activities carried out on Malcolm's orders. Money laundering. Witness intimidation. Even hints of worse things Daniel refused to elaborate on without immunity. Then it was Ryan's turn. He walked to the stand on the morning of the 3rd day, acutely aware of every camera pointed at him, every face in the jury box. The oath. The questions. Janet Reeves was gentle with him, building the story piece by piece, finding Chloe in the storm, the armed men at his garage, Malcolm's offer of $50,000 to forget everything. "And you refused this offer?" Janet asked. "Yes." "Why?" Ryan looked at the jury. "Because a 7-year-old kid was terrified and asking for help. Money doesn't change that. Nothing changes that. What happened after you refused? They beat me, locked me in a room, told me I'd stay there until I changed my mind. Did you change your mind? No. Even though you were injured, separated from your son, facing a powerful man who could destroy your entire life? Even then. Janet showed the jury photographs of Ryan's injuries, his swollen face, the bruises on his ribs, the split lip. These injuries were inflicted by men working for Malcolm Bennett? Yes. And Mr. Bennett himself was present when you were taken? Yeah. He was there when they threw me in the SUV. He was there when they locked me up. He knew exactly what was happening. Gregory Hale's cross-examination was brutal. He questioned Ryan's memory, suggested the injuries could have come from anywhere, implied Ryan was exaggerating for sympathy. Mr. Mercer, isn't it true that you were struggling financially before all this happened? Yes. 2 months behind on rent? Barely keeping your business afloat? That's right. And now, thanks to Victoria Bennett's generosity, you're doing much better financially? She hired me as her mechanic. That's not generosity, that's business. At triple your normal rate? For a woman who owns maybe 3 cars? That seems excessive. She wanted someone she could trust. She was willing to pay for it. Or perhaps you saw an opportunity, a wealthy family in crisis, a chance to play the hero and cash in. Ryan's jaw tightened. I didn't ask for anything. I just helped a scared kid. A scared kid whose mother is now paying you $40,000. That money came later, after everything. It wasn't a bribe. It wasn't payment for testimony. But it does give you an incentive to align your story with Ms. Bennett's, doesn't it? My story is the truth, whether she paid me or not. Gregory smiled. Of course it is. No further questions. Bullshit, Charlie. Ryan stepped down, feeling like he'd been put through a grinder. He caught Victoria's eye as he walked back to his seat. She gave him a small nod. The hardest part came on the 4th day when they called Eli to testify. Ryan had tried to prepare his son for this, told him to just tell the truth, answer the questions, and not be scared. But watching Eli walk to the witness stand looking small and nervous made Ryan's chest tight. Janet was gentle with him, asked simple questions. Let Eli tell the story in his own words. How he found Chloe, how they ran, how he kept her safe on the rooftops while men with guns chased them. Were you scared? Janet asked. Yeah, really scared. But you kept going anyway. My dad told me to protect her, so I did. That was very brave. Eli looked at Ryan. My dad's the brave one. He's the one who stayed behind so we could get away. The jury seemed moved. Several members were watching Eli with soft expressions. Then Gregory Hale stood for cross-examination, and Ryan wanted to leap across the courtroom and drag his son away from this. Eli, you were running through a storm at night. It was dark. You were scared. Are you absolutely sure the men chasing you were working for Mr. Bennett? They said Chloe's grandfather sent them. But you never saw Mr. Bennett himself that night, did you? No, and so you can't actually confirm that he was involved. Eli looked confused. But Chloe said, I'm asking what you saw, not what someone else told you. Objection, Janet said. The witness is 8 years old. Counsel is badgering him. Sustained. Mr. Hale, adjust your tone. Sad. Gregory softened slightly. Eli, I'm not trying to upset you. I just want to make sure we understand what actually happened. You ran because you were scared. But you don't know for certain who those men worked for, do you? Chloe knew. She told us. But Chloe was also scared and confused. Young children sometimes imagine threats that aren't there. She didn't imagine it. They were real. They chased us. I'm not saying the men weren't real. I'm saying we don't know who sent them. Eli's voice rose. Yes, we do. It was her grandfather. He kidnapped her. Eli, he hurt my dad. He locked him up, and then he tried to take Chloe back, and she was crying, and Eli broke off, tears streaming down his face. The judge intervened. Mr. Hale, I think we're done here. Your Honor, I have more questions. And I said we're done. The witness is excused. Ryan was already moving. He reached Eli as his son stepped down from the stand and pulled him into a hug. You did good, Ryan whispered. You did so good, bud. Eli sobbed into his shoulder while the courtroom watched in silence. Even some of the jurors were wiping their eyes. The final witness was Chloe. Victoria had fought against this, said her daughter had been through enough, didn't need to relive the trauma in front of cameras and strangers. But the prosecution had insisted. Chloe's testimony was critical. She was the victim, the person Malcolm had allegedly kidnapped. So on the 5th day of the trial, Chloe Bennett took the stand. She looked tiny in the witness chair. Her feet didn't touch the ground. She wore a simple dress and held a stuffed rabbit Victoria had brought from home. The judge spoke directly to her. Chloe, do you understand what it means to tell the truth? Yes. And do you promise to tell the truth today? Yes. Janet approached slowly, carefully. Chloe, do you know why you're here? To talk about grandfather. But that's right. I know this is hard, but I need you to tell us what happened. Can you do that? Chloe nodded. Let's start with the night you were taken. Where were you? At home. With Mom. We were making dinner. What happened? Men came to the door. They said Mom had to go with them, that there was an emergency. Did your mom go? She told me to hide, but I peeked and I saw them push her. She fell down. Then they took her away in a car. Victoria's face was pale as she listened. What did you do? Janet asked. I was hiding in my room, but then more men came. They found me. They said grandfather wanted to see me. Did you want to go with them? No, I was scared. I tried to run, but they grabbed me. Where did they take you? A big house. In the mountains. They locked me in a room and said I had to wait. How long were you there? I don't know. It felt like forever. I cried a lot. Did anyone come to see you? One of the men brought food, but he wouldn't talk to me. He just left it and locked the door again. How did you get out? Chloe's voice dropped. I broke the window. It was high up, but I stacked books and climbed. The glass cut me, but I didn't care. I just wanted to go home. And then what happened? I ran. It was dark and raining, and I didn't know where I was. I just kept running until I couldn't run anymore. She looked at Ryan, and then I saw the garage, and Ryan found me. Did Ryan help you? Yeah, he brought me inside. He was really nice. He gave me a blanket and cleaned my cut and said I was safe. Do you believe he saved your life? Yes. If he hadn't helped me, those men would have found me again. Janet turned to a different line of questioning. Chloe, do you know who ordered those men to take you? Grandfather. How do you know that? Because they said so, and because I heard him on the phone before, talking about how Mom was weak and I needed proper raising. You heard your grandfather say these things? Yes, lots of times. He didn't think I was listening, but I was. What else did you hear him say? Gregory Hale stood. Objection, hearsay. Your Honor, the child is testifying to statements she personally heard from the defendant, Janet argued. I'll allow it. Answer the question, Chloe. Chloe looked at her grandfather for the first time. Malcolm's face was stone. He said Mom was ruining me, making me soft. He said when he got control of me, he'd fix what she broke. Chloe's voice wavered. He said I belonged to the family, not to her. How did that make you feel? Scared? I don't want to belong to the family. I want to belong to my mom. Several jurors were visibly emotional now. Janet asked a few more questions, then stepped back. No further questions. Gregory Hale approached Chloe carefully. Even he seemed aware that attacking a 7-year-old victim would destroy his case. Chloe, I know you've been through something frightening, and I'm sorry for that, but I need to ask you a few questions, okay? Chloe nodded. You said you heard your grandfather talking on the phone, but you don't know who he was talking to, do you? No. And you don't know if he was talking about you specifically or about someone else? He said my name. Are you sure? You were listening through a door or a wall, weren't you? I'm sure. Chloe, when you were in that room, were you hurt? Did anyone hit you or threaten you? No, but they wouldn't let me leave. That's scary too. I understand, but the men who held you, did they say they worked for your grandfather? Yes. Did they show you proof? Identification? Anything that confirmed this? Chloe looked confused. Why would they lie? I'm not saying they lied. I'm asking if you're certain. I'm certain. Gregory paused. Chloe, do you love your grandfather? The question hung in the air. The courtroom was silent. Chloe's eyes filled with tears. I used to, before he got scary. When did he get scary? When he started saying I belonged to him. When he started looking at me like I was a thing he owned instead of a person. She wiped her eyes. I don't want to love someone who scares me. Gregory looked like he wanted to ask more but thought better of it. No further questions. Chloe was excused. Victoria met her at the stand and held her tight as they walked back to their seats. The prosecution rested. Malcolm's defense was brief. They called character witnesses who testified about his philanthropy, his business success, his contributions to the community. They painted him as a devoted grandfather concerned about his daughter's erratic behavior and his granddaughter's well-being. They argued the kidnapping was a misunderstanding, that Malcolm had simply exercised his rights as a family member to intervene when Victoria proved unstable. They produced doctors who questioned Victoria's mental state after the accident, suggested she was paranoid, delusional, inventing threats that didn't exist, but they couldn't explain away the armed men, the locked rooms, the beaten mechanic, the terrified children running through a storm. Closing arguments took a full day. Both sides made their final pitches to the jury. Then it was over. The jury was sent to deliberate. Ryan sat with Eli in the hallway outside the courtroom, waiting. Victoria paced with Chloe's hand in hers. Hours passed. The sun set. The courthouse emptied. Still no verdict. They were sent home for the night, told to return in the morning. Ryan barely slept. He kept replaying the trial in his head, wondering if they'd done enough, said enough, proved enough. The call came at 8:30 the next morning. The jury had reached a verdict. They rushed back to the courthouse. The gallery filled quickly. Media packed the halls outside. Ryan sat with his arm around Eli. Victoria held Chloe close. The jury filed in. 12 faces. Impossible to read. Has the jury reached a verdict? Well, the judge asked. We have, Your Honor. On the charge of kidnapping, how do you find? Guilty. A gasp ran through the courtroom. Chloe buried her face in Victoria's shoulder. On the charge of conspiracy? Guilty. On the charge of witness intimidation? Guilty. On and on. Every charge. Guilty, guilty, guilty. Malcolm's face remained impassive, but his hands gripped the edge of the table hard enough that his knuckles went white. The judge set sentencing for 2 weeks later. They walked out of the courthouse into a swarm of reporters. Cameras flashed. Questions were shouted. Victoria ignored all of it. She just held her daughter and kept walking until they reached the car. Ryan did the same with Eli. They met at Victoria's car in the parking garage, away from the media circus. It's over, Victoria said. She sounded stunned. It's actually over. Yeah, Ryan said. It is. Peace. Chloe looked up at her mother. Is grandfather going to jail? Yes, sweetheart, for a long time. Good. Chloe's voice was fierce. He should. They stood there in the quiet garage, 4 people who'd been through hell together and somehow come out the other side. Thank you, Victoria said to Ryan, for everything, for testifying, for... Her voice caught. For saving my daughter when I couldn't. You saved her too. You went through hell to find her. We all did. Victoria looked at both kids. And they saved each other. Eli and Chloe were holding hands now, these 2 children bound together by trauma and survival. What happens now? Ryan asked. Victoria was quiet for a moment. I don't know, but I think we figure it out together. Ryan nodded. Yeah, I think we do. 2 weeks later, Malcolm Bennett was sentenced to 35 years in federal prison. He would die behind bars. Everyone knew it. He was 67 years old. Even with good behavior, he'd never see freedom again. The Bennett empire collapsed completely in the aftermath. Companies sold off, assets liquidated, board members resigned or were fired. Victoria took control of what remained and rebuilt it into something different, something smaller, cleaner, focused on actual value instead of power. She moved permanently to Blackwater Bay, bought a house near the water, enrolled Chloe in the local school. And slowly, carefully, she built a new life that had nothing to do with her father's legacy. Ryan's garage thrived. Word got around about the mechanic who'd stood up to a billionaire. People respected that. They brought him their business. He hired 2 more mechanics, expanded into the empty space next door, actually took Sundays off for the first time in years, and on those Sundays, more often than not, he spent time with Victoria and Chloe. It started as friendly dinners, then trips to the park, then movie nights with all 4 of them crowded on Victoria's couch. Neither Ryan nor Victoria talked about what they were becoming to each other. They just let it happen naturally, slowly, without pressure or expectations. Because they'd both learned that the best things in life weren't the ones you planned or controlled. They were the ones you chose, day by day, person by person. The ones worth fighting for. 6 months after Malcolm Bennett's sentencing, Ryan woke up to the sound of rain against the windows and realized he wasn't afraid anymore. It was a small thing. Most people wouldn't even notice. But for Ryan, who'd spent months flinching at the sound of car engines in the street, who'd installed 3 new locks on his apartment door, who'd wake up in cold sweats thinking about armed men breaking down his garage entrance, waking up calm was everything. Eli was still asleep in the next room. The kid had stopped having nightmares about 2 months back. Now he slept like a rock, dead to the world until Ryan physically shook him awake for school. Ryan got up and made coffee, looked out at the garage below where his crew would show up in an hour. The place looked different now. Professional, organized. The kind of shop people trusted with their vehicles instead of just tolerating because it was cheap. His phone buzzed. A text from Victoria. Chloe wants to know if Eli can come to the aquarium with us Saturday. Yes, before you ask, I'm bribing you with lunch after. Ryan smiled and typed back. What kind of lunch? The expensive kind. The kind where they give you 3 forks and you're not sure which one to use. Pass. But I'll take burgers on the pier. Deal. He set the phone down and finished his coffee, thinking about how strange it was that this had become normal. Texting Victoria. Making plans. Being part of something that looked a lot like a family, even if nobody had said the word out loud yet. The truth was, Ryan had spent the last 6 months trying to figure out what he and Victoria were to each other. They weren't dating exactly, weren't just friends either. They existed in this space between 2 people who'd been through something terrible together and came out the other side holding on to each other because letting go felt impossible. He'd asked her about it once. They'd been sitting on her back deck watching the kids play in the yard, and he'd said, "What are we doing here?" Victoria had looked at him for a long moment before answering. Healing, I think. Together. That had been enough. It still was. Ryan showered and got dressed and woke Eli up for school. His son stumbled into the kitchen half asleep, poured himself cereal, and started eating without fully opening his eyes. Rough night? Ryan asked. Stayed up reading. What book? Ryan had. The one Chloe gave me, about the kid who builds a rocket ship in his garage. Any good? No. Yeah, he reminds me of you. Stubborn. Ryan laughed. I'm not stubborn. I'm determined. That's what stubborn people say. They drove to school through light morning traffic. Eli had transferred to the same school Chloe attended 3 months ago after Victoria had quietly taken care of the tuition. Ryan had tried to refuse, but Victoria had shut him down with one sentence. Eli and Chloe need each other. Stop making this harder than it is. She'd been right. The kids were inseparable now. Best friends in the way only people who'd survived something together could be. Ryan dropped Eli off and watched him run to where Chloe was waiting by the front entrance. They high-fived and disappeared into the building talking about something Ryan couldn't hear. He drove back to the garage and found his crew already there. Marcus and James, 2 mechanics he'd hired 4 months ago, were prepping the lifts. Sarah, his part-time bookkeeper, was in the office organizing invoices. "Morning, boss," Marcus called out. Ryan still wasn't used to being called that. "Morning. What's on the schedule?" 3 oil changes, a brake job, and that transmission rebuild you've been putting off. Not putting off, just waiting for the right moment. It's been 2 weeks. I like to think things through. Marcus grinned. You like to avoid complicated jobs. That too. Ryan spent the morning working. The rhythm of it soothed him. Engines and tools and problems that had clear solutions. No moral gray areas, no life or death decisions, just mechanical work that made sense. Around noon, Victoria showed up. She was wearing jeans and a sweater, hair pulled back, looking nothing like the CEO photos that still occasionally appeared in business magazines. She'd stepped away from most of her corporate responsibilities, kept just enough involvement to ensure the companies she'd restructured stayed ethical, and spent the rest of her time on the foundation she'd started, the Bennett Foundation for Family Services, helping families in crisis, providing legal aid, financial support, protection from abusive situations. It was Victoria's way of fighting back against everything her father had built, taking the family name and turning it into something that actually helped people. "Busy?" she asked, walking into the garage. "Always." "What's up?" "Local call. Receipts. Wanted to run something by you." She leaned against his workbench. "I'm thinking about expanding the foundation, opening a shelter in Blackwater Bay for families fleeing domestic situations. But I need someone on the board who actually understands what it's like to struggle, to rebuild from nothing." Ryan set down his wrench. "You want me on your board? I want your perspective, your honesty, the kind of voice that keeps people like me from losing touch with reality. I don't know anything about running a nonprofit. You know about survival, about protecting people, about doing the right thing even when it costs you everything." Victoria met his eyes. "That's worth more than any MBA. Ryan thought about it. Thought about the night he'd found Chloe in the rain, about the choice he'd made to help her even though it turned his entire life upside down. "Okay," he said. "I'll do it." Victoria smiled. "Good. First meeting is next week. Fair warning, there's a lot of paperwork." "I hate paperwork." "I know. That's why I'm bribing you with dinner after." "You're always bribing me with food. It's the only leverage I have." She pushed off the workbench. "I should go. Got a conference call in 20 minutes about the Seattle property. Still trying to turn your father's downtown building into low-income housing?" Martin. "Not trying. Doing." The permits finally came through. Victoria's expression hardened slightly. "Every brick of his empire that I can turn into something good feels like winning." Ryan understood that. The need to transform poison into medicine, to take something broken and make it whole. Victoria started to leave, then turned back. "Ryan? Yeah? Thank you for saying yes, for—" She hesitated. "For being here. I don't think I say that enough." "You don't have to say it at all." "I know, but I want to." She walked over and kissed his cheek, quick and soft. "See you Saturday." Then she was gone, leaving Ryan standing there with grease on his hands and something warm in his chest. Marcus appeared from under a Honda. "You two are terrible at pretending you're not together." "We're not together." "Right, and I'm not about to fail this emissions test." "You better not be failing emissions tests in my garage." Marcus laughed and went back to work. Ryan tried to focus on the transmission rebuild, but his mind kept drifting. He and Victoria had been dancing around this for months now, getting closer, pulling back, neither one willing to name what was happening between them. Part of it was fear. Ryan had been burned before. Sarah had walked out without warning and left him to raise Eli alone. Trusting someone again felt like standing on the edge of a cliff, but part of it was also respect. Victoria was still healing from a lifetime of her father's manipulation, still figuring out who she was without that weight. Ryan didn't want to rush her, didn't want to become another person demanding something from her before she was ready. So they existed in this strange in-between space, close but not too close, intimate but undefined, and most days that was enough. Saturday came with clear skies and unseasonably warm weather. Ryan picked up Eli, and they drove to the aquarium where Victoria and Chloe were waiting by the entrance. The kids ran ahead while Ryan and Victoria followed at a slower pace. "Eli's excited," Victoria said. "He texted Chloe at 6 this morning asking if we were still going." 6? I didn't even know he was awake." Chloe was already up. She does that now. Wakes up early and reads in her room until I tell her it's time for breakfast. "Still having trouble sleeping?" "Sometimes. Less than before." Victoria watched her daughter run up to the jellyfish exhibit, Eli right beside her. Her therapist says she's making progress, that the nightmares will fade eventually. Eli's therapist says the same thing. I'm just waiting for eventually to actually show up. They walked through the exhibits, watched the kids press their faces against the glass, pointing at sharks and stingrays and tropical fish. For a couple of hours, they were just a family doing normal family things. Lunch was at a burger place on the pier overlooking the water, the kind of spot where the food was greasy and perfect, and nobody cared if you got ketchup on your shirt. "This is better than the fancy place," Chloe announced, stealing one of Eli's fries. "Told you," Ryan said to Victoria. "Fine. You win this round." After lunch, they walked along the pier. The kids ran ahead again, chasing seagulls, laughing. Victoria slipped her hand into Ryan's. It was the first time she'd done that in public. The first time she'd made their connection visible to anyone watching. Ryan didn't say anything, just laced his fingers through hers and kept walking. "I've been thinking," Victoria said after a while, "about what we're doing, about us." Ryan's stomach tightened. "Okay." "For months I've been telling myself we're taking it slow, that we're just friends helping each other through trauma, that anything more would be complicated and messy and probably a bad idea. Yeah, I've told myself the same thing, but I don't think that's true anymore." Victoria stopped walking and turned to face him. "I think I'm falling for you, Ryan. Have been for a while, and I'm tired of pretending I'm not." Ryan looked at her, this woman who'd walked through fire to save her daughter, who'd stood up to her own father and won, who'd taken a legacy of corruption and turned it into something that actually helped people. "I'm falling for you too," he said quietly. "Probably since the night you showed up at my garage with lunch and acted like we were just business associates, even though we both knew better." Victoria smiled. "We were convincing, though. Terrible. Marcus saw through us immediately." He got straight. "Chloe, too. She keeps asking when you're going to be her stepfather." "What do you tell her?" "That adults are slow and stupid about these things." Ryan laughed. "Accurate." Victoria stepped closer. "So what do we do about it?" "I don't know. I've never been good at this stuff. Sarah left because I was too focused on work, too busy trying to keep everything together to actually be present. I don't want to make the same mistakes." "You won't, because you're not the same person you were then, and I'm not Sarah." Victoria's voice was firm. "I don't need perfect, Ryan. I need real. I need someone who will tell me the truth, even when it's hard. Someone who will stand up for what's right, even when it costs them everything. I can do that. I know you can. You already have." They stood there on the pier with the ocean behind them and their kids laughing somewhere down the boardwalk and the sun warm on their faces. "So we're doing this?" Ryan asked. "Actually trying?" "Yeah, we're doing this." Victoria kissed him. It was soft and careful and tasted like salt air and French fries. When they pulled apart, Eli and Chloe were standing a few feet away, staring at them. "Finally," Eli said. "Took you long enough," Chloe added. The kids high-fived each other and ran off again. Ryan and Victoria looked at each other and started laughing. "They're going to be insufferable about this," Victoria said. "Absolutely. We'll never hear the end of it." "Worth it?" Ryan pulled her close. "Yeah, worth it." 3 months later, Ryan stood in the community center downtown watching Victoria give a speech at the opening of the new shelter. She transformed one of Malcolm's old office buildings into a place where families could escape abuse, rebuild their lives, find safety. 20 units, full legal support, childcare services, job training programs. Everything her father's empire had destroyed, Victoria was rebuilding. "This shelter represents something my father never understood," Victoria was saying to the crowd of donors and community members. "That real power isn't about control. It's about service, about using resources to lift people up instead of holding them down." Ryan watched her command the room with the same intensity she'd once brought to corporate boardrooms. But this was different. This mattered. After the speech, people swarmed Victoria with congratulations and questions. Ryan hung back, letting her handle it. This was her moment. Eli and Chloe were on the other side of the room with some other kids playing a game on someone's phone. "She's really something, isn't she?" Ryan turned. An older woman stood beside him, late 60s maybe, with kind eyes and silver hair. "Yeah, she is. You must be Ryan. Victoria's told me about you." "All good things, I hope." The woman smiled. "She said you saved her daughter's life, and that in doing so you saved hers too." Ryan didn't know what to say to that. "I'm Margaret Chen," the woman continued. "I run the women's shelter on the east side. Victoria asked me to consult on this project. She looked around the space. She's serious about this, about making real change. I know. She's lucky to have someone who supports her, who sees her as more than just her father's daughter. I'm the lucky one, Ryan said honestly. Margaret patted his arm. I think you both are. The event wound down. People filtered out. Ryan helped clean up while Victoria dealt with the last few stragglers. Finally, it was just the four of them. Ryan and Victoria, Eli and Chloe. How'd I do? Victoria asked. You were perfect, Chloe said. I'm biased, Ryan added, but I thought you killed it, Uck. Victoria looked around the shelter, at the fresh paint and new furniture and the space that would soon be filled with families starting over. This is just the beginning, she said quietly. There's so much more to do, more buildings to convert, more programs to start, more people to help. And you'll do it, Ryan said, because you're stubborn and determined and you don't quit. Victoria smiled. I learned that from someone. They locked up and headed to the parking lot. The kids climbed into Victoria's car while Ryan and Victoria stood by his truck. Dinner at my place tonight? Victoria asked. I'm thinking pasta. Nothing fancy. Sounds good. I'll bring dessert. Nothing from a bakery. Eli mentioned you've been practicing making brownies. I've burned 3 batches. I wouldn't call that practicing. 4th time's the charm. Ryan laughed. You have too much faith in me. No, I have exactly the right amount. She kissed him quickly and got in her car. Ryan watched them drive away, then climbed into his truck. He stopped at the grocery store on the way home, grabbed ingredients for brownies. Probably going to burn this batch too, but he'd try anyway. Back at the apartment, he found a note on the door. Just 3 words in handwriting he didn't recognize. We know where you live. Ryan's blood went cold. He looked around the parking lot, saw nothing unusual, just normal cars, normal people going about their day. He pulled out his phone and called Victoria. Hey, what's up? Someone left a note on my door. A threat. Silence. Then Victoria's voice, tight with controlled fear. What did it say? We know where you live. I'm calling the police. Don't go inside. Don't touch anything. Victoria, promise me, Ryan. I promise. He waited in the parking lot until the police arrived. They took the note, dusted for prints, asked questions. Victoria showed up 20 minutes later with both kids. She'd called Mrs., parting to watch them and come straight over. Anything? She asked Lieutenant Chen, who'd caught the case. Nothing so far. No prints on the note. Generic paper you can buy anywhere. Chen looked at Ryan. You have any idea who might want to intimidate you? Malcolm Bennett's lawyers are appealing the conviction. Maybe they think if they scare me, we'll look into it. In the meantime, I'm assigning a patrol to watch your place. After the police left, Ryan and Victoria sat in his truck staring at his apartment door. This is my fault, Victoria said. No, it's not. My father's people, coming after you because you testified. We don't know that for sure. Who else would it be? Ryan didn't have an answer. Victoria pulled out her phone. I'm hiring private security. For you and Eli. 24-hour protection until we figure this out. I can't afford... I'm not asking. I'm telling. Her voice was sharp, scared. Someone threatened you because of me. I'm not going to let anything happen to you or your son. Ryan wanted to argue, but he could see the fear in her eyes. The same fear he'd seen that night at the estate when she thought she'd lost Chloe forever. Okay, he said. Okay, and the security team arrived within the hour. 2 professionals who did a sweep of the apartment checked for bugs or cameras and set up a monitoring system. Nothing happened that night, or the next night, or the night after that. The note remained the only threat. No follow-up, no additional contact. After a week, Ryan started to relax. Maybe it was just some random person, some troll trying to scare him. Then Malcolm Bennett's lawyer released a statement to the press. They were claiming new evidence, witness tampering. They alleged that Victoria had paid Ryan and the other witnesses to lie, that the entire trial had been a conspiracy to frame an innocent man. It was garbage, complete fiction, but it made headlines anyway. Ryan's phone blew up with reporters calling. News vans showed up outside his garage. Strangers recognized him on the street and shouted questions. Victoria got it worse. Her photo was everywhere. Tabloids ran stories about the billionaire's daughter who'd turned on her own father. Conspiracy theorists claimed she'd orchestrated everything for control of the family fortune. The foundation's donors started pulling back. People who'd been excited to support the shelter suddenly wanted distance from the controversy. Victoria held a press conference, stood in front of cameras, and called the allegations what they were: lies from a desperate man trying to avoid consequences. But the damage was done. Public opinion was shifting. People who'd supported Victoria were now questioning her motives, questioning everything. Ryan watched it happen and felt helpless. Then Lieutenant Chen called with news. They'd traced the note. It had been placed by a private investigator hired by Malcolm's legal team. They'd found the same investigator had been following Ryan and Victoria for weeks, documenting their relationship, building a case for witness tampering. "Can we charge them?" Victoria asked. "Intimidation charges are tricky. The note is threatening but vague, and the PI will claim he was just doing his job." Chen looked tired. "But I've got something else. Your father's lawyers have been leaking information to the press, confidential trial documents. That's actually illegal." "What do you need from us?" Ryan asked. "Nothing. We've got enough. Just sit tight and let us handle it." Yes. The next week, 2 of Malcolm's attorneys were arrested for evidence tampering and leaking sealed court documents. The appeals process ground to a halt. A judge sanctioned the entire legal team. Malcolm's conviction stood. The 35-year sentence remained in place. It was over. Actually, finally over. Ryan was closing the garage one evening when Victoria called. "Turn on the news," she said. He pulled up a live stream on his phone. A reporter stood outside the federal courthouse. "In a stunning development, Malcolm Bennett's legal team has withdrawn all appeals. The conviction and sentence will stand, Mr." Bennett released a statement through his attorney saying he accepts full responsibility for his actions and will serve his time without further legal challenges. Ryan stared at the screen. "What the hell?" "I may have had something to do with that," Victoria said. "What did you do?" "I visited him, in prison, 2 days ago." Ryan felt his stomach drop. "Victoria, I needed to see him, to understand if there was anything left of the father I remembered. If somewhere under all that corruption there was still a person who could feel remorse. And there wasn't. He's exactly what he's always been. But I told him something that got through." Victoria's voice was quiet. "I told him that every dollar he spent on lawyers trying to get out of prison was a dollar I'd match and donate to organizations fighting corruption. That I'd turn his entire fortune into a weapon against everything he built. That I'd spend the rest of my life making sure his name became synonymous with justice instead of power." "What did he say?" "That I'd become what he always wanted me to be. Someone strong enough to stand alone." She paused. Then he dropped the appeals. Ryan didn't know what to say. "I think part of him is actually proud," Victoria continued, "that I beat him, that I'm using everything he taught me against him." "How do you feel about that?" "I don't know. Relieved, maybe. That it's finally over. That we can move on." "We can," Ryan said. "We will." That night, Ryan made dinner for all of them at Victoria's house. The brownies actually came out right this time, only slightly burned around the edges. After the kids went to bed, Ryan and Victoria sat on her back deck, watching the lights of Blackwater Bay spread out below them. "I've been thinking about the future, Victoria said. "About what comes next. And, I want to step back from the company completely, hand it over to people I trust, and focus entirely on the foundation. On building something real. That's a big change. I know, but I don't want Chloe growing up the way I did. Thinking success means sacrificing everything else. I want her to see that you can be successful and still be present, still be human." Well, Ryan took her hand. "She already sees that, because you're showing her." Victoria leaned against him. "What about you? What do you want?" "Honestly, this. Right here." Ryan looked out at the city. "A few months ago, I was barely keeping my head above water, working myself to death just to survive, and now I've got a business that's actually profitable, a kid who's happy and healthy, a future that doesn't feel like constant scrambling. And me? And you, which still feels kind of impossible if I'm being honest. Victoria smiled. Why? Because you're Victoria Bennett. You could have anyone, and I'm just a mechanic from Blackwater Bay who got lucky. You're not lucky. You're good. You're kind. You do the right thing even when it costs you everything. She turned to face him. Those aren't lucky qualities, Ryan. Those are choices. And they're the reason I fell in love with you. Ryan's breath caught. It was the first time either of them had said the word. I love you too, he said. Have for a while. Just wasn't sure when to say it. How about now? Yeah, now works. They kissed with the city lights below them and their children sleeping safely inside, and the future stretching out ahead of them, full of possibility. It wasn't perfect. They both carried scars. Both had nightmares sometimes. Both struggled with trust and fear and all the weight of what they'd been through. But they had each other, and they had 2 kids who'd survived the impossible and come out stronger. And that was enough. More than enough. A year later, Ryan stood in his garage on a Saturday morning doing inventory when Eli came running in. Dad, come quick! What's wrong? Nothing's wrong, just come on! Ryan followed his son outside where Victoria's car was parked. Chloe jumped out first, practically vibrating with excitement. Tell him, she said to Victoria. Victoria got out of the car holding an envelope. She was grinning like a kid. The Seattle property is officially converted, she said. 150 units of affordable housing, opening in 3 months. That's amazing. And the city council approved the proposal for the second shelter. We break ground next month. Victoria, that's incredible. It gets better. She handed him the envelope and opened it. Ryan pulled out a letter on official letterhead. It took him a moment to process what he was reading. This is from the governor's office, he said. Keep reading. They want to recognize the foundation with a state award for community service, and they're specifically mentioning the night I found Chloe, calling it an example of ordinary citizens making extraordinary choices. They want you and me to accept the award together at the state capitol. Ryan looked up at her. I don't need awards for doing the right thing. I know, but maybe other people need to see that doing the right thing matters. That one person standing up can change everything. Ryan thought about that night in the storm, finding a terrified little girl and making a choice that turned his entire world upside down. He'd do it again in a heartbeat. Okay, he said. We'll accept it, together. The kids cheered. Victoria kissed him. And for a moment everything was exactly as it should be. That evening, all 4 of them drove down to the beach. They'd started doing this once a month, just packing a picnic and spending time together away from work and school and everything else. The sun was setting over the water, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Eli and Chloe were building a sandcastle near the waterline, while Ryan and Victoria sat on a blanket watching. You ever think about that night? Victoria asked. About how different things could have gone? All the time. If I'd been too tired. If I'd ignored what Eli saw. If I'd taken your father's money. But you didn't. No, I didn't. Why? Really? What made you risk everything for a kid you didn't know? Ryan thought about it. Because I know what it feels like to be scared and alone and hoping someone will help. After Sarah left, I felt like I was drowning, and nobody stepped up. Nobody helped. He looked at Chloe, laughing as Eli showed her how to reinforce the castle walls. I couldn't do that to someone else, especially not a kid. Victoria was quiet for a moment. My father used to say that compassion was weakness, that helping people made you vulnerable. What do you think now? I think compassion is the only thing that makes us strong, that being vulnerable is how we connect with each other, how we build something real. She took Ryan's hand. My father had all the power in the world, and he died alone in a prison cell. You had nothing, and you built a family. We built a family, Ryan corrected. All of us. Together. The kids ran back to the blanket, sandy and breathless and happy. Can we get ice cream on the way home? Eli asked. We literally just ate, Ryan said. That was an hour ago. That's not how time works. Please? Chloe wants ice cream too. Don't drag me into this, Chloe said, then immediately added, but I do want ice cream. Victoria laughed. Fine, ice cream, but only because today is a celebration. They packed up and headed back to the car. Ryan carried the blanket while Victoria handled the picnic basket. The kids ran ahead, already arguing about what flavors they wanted. Standing there in this parking lot, watching his son and the girl he'd saved and the woman he loved all piling into the car, Ryan felt something he hadn't felt in years. Complete. Whole. Like all the broken pieces had finally come together into something that made sense. It wasn't the life he'd planned. Wasn't what he'd expected when he'd opened that garage door on a stormy night and found a terrified child standing in the rain. But it was good. Real. Built on choices that mattered and people who cared, and the simple truth that doing the right thing, even when it's hard, even when it costs you everything, is always worth it in the end. Because that's what family is. Not blood. Not obligation. Not some perfect ideal that exists in commercials and greeting cards. Family is choosing to show up for people who need you. Standing beside them when things get dark. Fighting for them when they can't fight for themselves. Family is loving imperfect people perfectly and letting them love you back. Ryan climbed into the driver's seat. Eli and Chloe were already arguing about toppings in the back seat. Victoria reached over and squeezed his hand. "Ready?" she asked. Ryan looked at his family, his impossible, beautiful, hard-won family. "Yeah," he said. "I'm ready." And he was.